Kilgore, as a friend and a fellow Christian, to give us the invocation this evening. Thank you, Scott.
If you so desire, please join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, we come to you this time with grateful hearts. Lord, we find in your word, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. And we've been able to see how you really blessed us as we look through the years and the centuries. And Lord, we see how your hand has been upon us. And we do not take this lightly, but recognize it's only because of your divine favor, not because of who we are or what we've done. So thank you, Lord. And Lord, we also know that you bring leaders, that all authority is ordained of you, and that those that you put in these positions of decision-making, of consensus building, have been by your choice. And so, Lord, we acknowledge them and honor them for their willingness to serve in this regard. Lord, we're grateful for folks who have purpose and calling, and Lord, those who have needs and desires and wants for their own community and for their activism, Lord, and how it shows itself in various forms to try to discern your will and your way. But Lord, thank you that we can come to you asking for wisdom, as your word says that we're to come and ask boldly, knowing that, Lord, you don't begrudge giving it to us. But when we acknowledge our own wants and our own lacks, Lord, you fill those needs and those gaps. So, Lord, we pray that your Holy Spirit would wash over us, giving us his peace and his guidance, and that, Lord, this one, the Holy Spirit who walks along with us, Lord, we pray that he'd be honored as with you and your Son through all that will be going on here today. We ask these things in the blessed and powerful name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Nash.
Here.
Commissioner Beasley Brown.
Here.
Commissioner Perigin.
Here.
Commissioner Denning.
Here.
Mayor Wilkerson.
Here. First item on our agenda is a public hearing for the purpose of receiving comments related to Year 16 Annual Action Plan and Consolidated Plans for years 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. Mr. Cook, are you making that presentation?
Sir, thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. At tonight's public hearing, I'll be presenting the draft 5-year consolidated plan and draft annual action plan for the city's community development block grant program. This public hearing is also an opportunity for the public to comment on either draft plan or just the community development and housing needs in general of the city. I will give a brief presentation and then I'll open it up at the end for public comment. The city receives approximately $500,000 each year from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to address community development and housing challenges across the community. All CDBG-funded activities must benefit at least one of 3 HUD national objectives. The first and most common is at least 51% of the people benefiting from the project must be of low to moderate income. Low to moderate income, or LMI, is a HUD term, which basically means the persons are at 80% or below the area median income of Bowling Green. The second national objective is prevention or elimination of slum and blight. And the third is urgent community need, which must be tied to a presidentially declared disaster. So just to talk a little bit about the planning process, every 5 years we are required to complete a consolidated plan. This establishes our priority needs for spending our funds. This is done through a lot of data analysis and public input. And then each year of the consolidated plan, we have an annual action plan which identifies specific projects for funding to address our priority needs. So to talk about the planning process for this current consolidated plan, city staff utilized several sources for input. The first is a housing needs assessment and market analysis was completed by an outside consultant from November through February of this year. The housing study contained hundreds of pages of data, research, and analysis on our local housing market. It also included focus group meetings with representatives from over 20 agencies representing the housing market in the capacity of real estate, banking, public housing, homeless service providers. And we got an input, we feel like, from a lot of different people in the community. We also had stakeholder surveys. We had 20 different ones of those completed from representatives from the housing market. Then we also had a resident survey that everyone in the community was available to complete and share their views on the housing issues in Bowling Green. We got over 900 responses to that survey. Also, back in December, the city held a homelessness discussion with city staff and our local homeless service providers to gain a better understanding of the needs of our homeless population and to also figure out ways the city can help address those needs. And then we also receive input through public hearings and public comment periods. We're in the middle of our second public comment period right now. Our first public comment period and public hearing was actually back in January. So before I get into the findings from the housing needs assessment and market analysis, one of the things I want to mention was this was a very large, comprehensive study. It included all income groups, included all of Bowling Green and Warren County. Tonight, I'm really just going to share the high points I felt like are more geared towards the consolidated plan, and in particular, people of low to moderate income. The actual housing needs assessment and market analysis will be presented by our consultant, Bowen National Research, next month to the community. So in regards to population growth, the city grew over the last 17 years by 17,000, or around 35%. During that time period, we also added over 7,000 households, about 37% growth. When you compare that to the state growth of 12.5% in population and 13% in households, it's substantial. The housing study really looked at the next 5 years in Bowling Green, where the city is expected to grow by about 5,000 or 7%. This nearly triples the state's projected growth. And then our households are expected to grow by about 2,000 or 8% over that time period. In regards to household growth over the next 5 years, we are expected to add about 866 renter households and over 1,200 owner households. This is kind of a surprise probably for some, since 2000, rental housing development has outpaced for sale housing development in Bowling Green. This change in the trend is mostly related to our aging millennial population, that age group of 25 to 34. Many of these folks will be exiting out of rental housing product into for housing product over the next 5 years, and will represent 18% of the household growth. While all of the age groups, almost all, are expected to grow over the next 5 years, the biggest change is going to be seen in our senior growth, which will be 976 more households, representing 35% of the growth. Household growth by income, while most income segments, or almost all income segments, will be growing over the next 5 years. Renters making $100,000 or more will represent about 49% of the growth. Other notable statistics were that 60 to 99,000 range will be at 7.3% growth, and the 10 to 19,000 will be 4.8%. In regards to owner household, owners making between about 11 and 20,000 and 20 and 30,000 will combine for an increase in more than 500 households. This is mostly attributed to that large increase in the senior population that I mentioned before, where many of these folks will be transitioning out of the workforce into retirement over the next 5 years. Other notable increases is in that 30 to 39,000 range for owner households at 18%, and 60 to 99,000 income range will see 6% growth.
Is that for household or per individual?
Households.
Thank you.
In regards to housing supply, some of the key points that came out of the study, we learned that 45% of our renters are cost burdened, which means they are spending over 30% of their monthly income on housing costs. We also found that 25% of our renters are severe cost burden, meaning they're spending over 50% of their income on housing costs. Another thing we found in the study, all 1,400 of our tax credit and government subsidized units are occupied with waiting lists, so there's strong demand in that segment of the market. The study also looked at homelessness and vulnerability with a point-in-time study done in 2018. It was found that 162 persons in Warren County were homeless. Of that amount, 139 were sheltered and 23 were unsheltered. The study also found that 27.5% of the population is below the poverty level, which is very important when you're looking at the vulnerability of our population becoming homeless. And speaking of homeless vulnerability, the study found that 54% of our households making $20,000 or less are paying 50% or more of their income towards rent. So during the creation of the last consolidated plan, the city staff found that many of our housing issues are really concentrated in a 6 census tract area known as the Bowling Green Reinvestment Area. This is home to our lowest incomes, our oldest housing stock, and our highest concentration of minorities in comparison to the rest of the city. Over the last 5 years, the city has been investing in long-term improvements in this area to try to create a better residential environment, improve economic opportunities, and address the housing issues with really an overarching goal of trying to make this area more attractive for private investment, to where a family wants to buy a house to raise their children in, and where a business perhaps will want to locate to provide services and create jobs. The housing study looked at the BGRA. Similar to the rest of the city, 90% of the housing stock is occupied. However, much different from the rest of the city, 72% is renter, while 27% is owner. You can see the city statistics there, 54% renter and 45% owner. Looking at age of housing, 57% of the renter-occupied units in the BGRA were built before 1970, which is much higher than the city rate of 31%. And 67% of the owner-occupied housing was built before 1970, which again is much higher than the city average of 35%. And then looking at the median home value of the BGRA, it's just under $87,000, whereas the city is at $154,000. We also looked at cost burden renters and owners in the BGRA. While this number is high at 46.2%, it is slightly above the city average I mentioned earlier, and our owners at 26.5% cost burden. In regards to low to moderate income, 74% of the BGRA is LMI. This is 20% higher than the city average, and we have a minority population of 42% in this area. So we feel like the way that we can best utilize our CDBG funds is by addressing the priority needs of quality affordable housing, economic opportunity, and neighborhood improvements. Quality affordable housing came up by far the most from our public input, and obviously it's supported by the data I just provided. Something else we found was there's a strong need for transitional housing in this community for our homeless population. We learned during our homeless discussion back in December that the number of days that our homeless population is spending in shelters has increased a lot over the last year, which is really showing a need for transitional housing. In regards to economic opportunity, I mentioned the high poverty rate earlier and the high LMI rate of the BGRA. And then with neighborhood improvements, I mentioned the age of the housing stock in the BGRA, and this housing stock has the potential to provide blighting influences and economic disinvestment into this area. So city staff feels the best course of action to take is to continue investing our CDBG funds into the neighborhoods where our housing issues are most prominent. Our next neighborhood of focus in the Neighborhood Improvements Program in the BGRA is Census Block Groups 1033 and 1034. This is going to be the area located in between Old Morgantown Road, and University Drive. So the way we came up with projects in this neighborhood was through a two-pronged approach. First, we had two cross-departmental teams of city staff members take tours of the neighborhood, making observations for potential improvements. We also had citizen input, where we had one-on-one stakeholder meetings with a Hispanic pastor, a longtime resident, and then also a property owner. And then we also held a public meeting on February 26th at the Bowling Green Learning Center, which is the former Dishman McGinnis School, to get the public's input on what they liked about the neighborhood and then what opportunities they saw for public and private property improvements. And it was through this input that we utilized the info to develop our project list. Before I get into the projects, I just want to talk about the themes that emerged from this two-pronged approach. A lot of people like the close access to amenities. You have educational centers, grocery store, restaurants, shops. The diversity of the neighborhood was also a plus. Some of the minuses was lack of property maintenance, high-level renters, need for more home ownership, and need for pedestrian facilities. So it was these themes that we used as a guiding force for our project planning. So we are proposing to allocate $1.3 million over the next 2 years into this neighborhood, which would be years 16 and 17 of our CDBG program. 70% of that would go towards housing, with $420,000 marked for exterior property improvements. This would be a program that could replace failing roofs, that could replace failing windows, doors, could remove that old tree that's fallen down in someone's front yard. And then the additional $508,000 is recommended for new housing opportunities. So this could go towards down payment assistance, transitional housing. It could go towards purchasing dilapidated rental housing to be rehabbed for either affordable home ownership or affordable rental properties. We will be leaning on outside partnerships for implementation of these two programs, so we will be soon marketing to our nonprofits, our homeless service providers, and also our public housing organizations. We are also recommending $10,000 for neighborhood branding and marketing. The old Morgantown Road corridor is home to, formerly and currently home to many international businesses. We feel like that's an economic opportunity that we could capitalize on, so we will be meeting with the neighbors in the future to further discuss that. And then finally, the remaining 30% would go towards pedestrian improvements, specifically new sidewalks on Johnson and Dennis. This is a map of the existing sidewalks in the neighborhood. You can find those sidewalks in yellow, and then the proposed new sidewalk on Johnson and Dennis in blue. You can see that this sidewalk would extend from Old Morgantown Road to the Muse, which is a new, very large multifamily housing development going into the neighborhood. We feel like this development will increase pedestrian and traffic activity, so we felt like this project was needed to improve safety. And then we will also be connecting to the existing sidewalk on Dennis that stops behind the former Dishman-McGinnis School. Recommended projects and funding for the next fiscal year. So as part of our annual action plan, we have to lay out just what we're doing next year, even though I've just mentioned the next 2 years. So we haven't gotten our CDBG allocation yet from HUD, but we're expecting to receive around $542,000. Of that amount, $34,000 would go to the Bowling Green Human Rights Commission to continue with fair housing education and outreach into the community, and to continue with fair housing discrimination complaints and resolutions. $74,000 would be utilized for the administrative oversight of the program, and then the remaining $434,000 would be utilized for the neighborhood improvements that I mentioned before. We will also have prior funding utilized this next fiscal year as well. We are proposing to allocate $15,000 to the Bowling Green Human Rights Commission for ADA improvements. The city, as a direct recipient of CDBG funds, we are responsible to make sure that our subrecipients are compliant with ADA standards. And while the Human Rights Commission did make ADA upgrades to their facility several years ago, they're still deficient in a few areas that we'll be assisting them with next year. Some of you may recall last year we awarded $500,000 to Habitat for Humanity to install new infrastructure that will lead to 22 new houses for low to moderate income families. So that project will be starting soon. Currently in acquisition, we got the Pettigo Park Pathways project that will connect the park to the surrounding neighborhood in various locations, and then we'll also connect park goers to amenities within the park. And then we are also currently under construction with the Census Track 112 Sidewalks project, which is putting new sidewalks on Crewdson, North Lee, Old Barren River Road, North Sunrise, and Woodway. So we're in the middle of a public comment period, which will end April 30th. After that, the annual action plan and consolidated plan will be submitted to our City Board of Commissioners for approval on May 7th. After that, it will be submitted to the HUD Louisville Field Office for their approval, which is expected by July 1st. And then after that, we expect to start implementing our annual action plan. So if anybody would like to submit written comments, they can do so to me by April 30th to Nick Cook, P.O. Box 430, Bowling Green, Kentucky 42102, or they may be emailed to ncs.info@bgky.org. And our plans are available on our website for review. So,
Thank you. Did anyone have a question for Mr. Cook? Yes, sir.
I have a couple questions. First of all, thank you all so much for all your hard work, and I'm excited to see the market analysis. And you said that was going to be available in March?
Actually, next
Or
month.
sorry, not March, I mean May, sorry.
Yes, it will be presented to the community next month.
Okay, great. So when in your presentation you talked about how the severely cost burden, over 50% of their income going towards housing, did that number include the amount they're paying towards utilities?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure, but I'd be happy to look into that further with our consultant and get back with you if that's okay.
Sure, I apologize for not getting to that question to you beforehand. I'm asking because I'm wondering if some of the exterior improvements that we're going to make with this portion of the funding, will that help with making the homes more energy efficient and therefore helping their cost-burdened household cost related to utility bills?
So we have a similar program right now that we are contracting with Live the Dream Development in Census Track 112, which is for an exterior property improvements. And many of those projects do include roof replacements, window replacements, new vinyl siding, door replacements, which do improve energy efficiency and lower utility costs.
You had mentioned that our waiting lists are really long, and so are any of these things that you've mentioned going to address the wait list at all? Do we know yet if that's part of what we're addressing through this funding?
The waiting lists were associated with government subsidized housing and tax credit housing. I do know that there are 2 new tax credit housing developments coming online this year in Bowling Green. Our funding for the new housing opportunities will just be open to basically, it'll just be providing new quality affordable housing for low to moderate income families. So.
Oh, and then I'm just a little bit confused about this year's action plan, but then you described prior year or prior funding from CDBG money. So is the list you had there the money we're receiving from this new 2-year CDBG funds, or your action plan for this year is just, it's a mix of some of it's future, some of it's past?
So the action plan actually has to include all projects that we will be dispersing funds to over the next fiscal year. So the example of Habitat for Humanity, we awarded them $500,000 of prior year funding. However, they've not spent any of those funds yet because the project will be starting soon. So that's why they're still included, even though it's prior year funding, it's still in the annual action plan because they'll be spending the money that next fiscal year.
Got it. So then how much new of this next pot that we're getting are we projecting to spend this year?
So we're expecting to receive $542,000. Again, that's just a projection. We've not received our amount from HUD, but of that amount, $434,000, I believe, will go towards neighborhood improvements.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Public hearing with regarding to the Community Development Block Grant funding. If anyone has a comment to make, this would be the appropriate time for that issue. Does anyone want to step forward? On Community Development Block Grant, I think, Miss Ma'am, would you want to come on up? You'll come up to the microphone, please, and identify yourself so that we can have it for the record.
Good evening. I'm Jeannie Smith, and I just had a quick question, if you don't mind. You mentioned that $420,000 was going to be used for exterior improvements. Out of that amount, is there any designation? Is that available for any homeowner within those areas, or is there a way to target low-income homeowners versus investment properties? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So this program, we will need to contract out with an outside entity to administer the program. The way we are currently administering this program is there is a first come, first serve application process. While the majority of the houses that are being served are low-income people, this program is available to landlords. The way the program has previously worked, $5,000 is given as a free grant to the homeowners, and then for the landlords, they must put in a 20% match. So to get $5,000, they got to have a total project cost of $6,250, and then for businesses, it's a 50-50 match. So to get $5,000, you got to spend $5,000. So I think, does that answer your question?
You have a question, sir, or comment? Up to the microphone, please, and please give us your name.
My name's Michael Wade, and I just got a question about, I'm a retired vet, and I just got a question about what he brought up about the homeless and what is the city's plan to do about the homeless situation. I know we have in plans like Hotel Inc. and all the other entities, but what is the city's plan about taking care of the homeless in this city?
through this current annual action plan, we are allocating $500,000 for new housing opportunities, and that would include transitional housing for our homeless population. So the city will be marketing this funding opportunity to our homeless service providers.
Anyone else that had a comment or a question? You'll have to come up to the microphone, please, and give us your name.
I have a thing I'm thinking about, like for like the homeless people that are out here and how we feed them or whatever. It's like I think we should have like groups set up in parts of the town, right? And then like 2 or 3 in that one area around houses or businesses or certain streets or whatever. And those homeless to pay for their housing and their food is to clean up the property, because everybody's got to work, because that's what our Lord says. He says work. So they work, because mainly the homeless people, that's the reason why we got a lot of mess out there, because they want to go out here and they wanted to find a drug or something like that. So this also keep them from doing that, It pays for their food, it pays for their housing, life's better. Life lasts longer, That's what I'm thinking. I think that would work out. I mean, I'll pick it up, and I don't expect no money, It's all love, right? It's 2 commandments our Lord gave us, is love. Love God with all our mind, our heart, soul. That's Jesus' direction. What is Jesus' direction? 2 commandments: love God and your neighbor, your friend, your enemy. Doesn't matter. Give him time. Hopefully, the judge is in the courthouse, and look how merciful he is. He'll give you another chance. He might make you have to pay a fine or something, but he's all in the hands of the Lord, right? That's how it is. So I think that would work out better. I think things would come along a lot better.
Thank you, sir, for your comments. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Would there be anybody else for the public hearing on community development block grant funding? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. Thank you, Mr. Childers. Mr. Cook, we appreciate it. Time for awards and recognitions. Does anyone have anything this evening?
I have one, Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to announce that the Association of Local Government Auditors, also called ALGA, Awards Program Committee, has announced that the Internal Auditor's Office here at the City of Bowling Green has received the Distinguished 2018 Knighton Award in the Extra Small Shop category. We were selected for the audit that our internal auditor Deborah Jenkins did on our building and inspection division audit. Got an award on that. The judges were from peer organizations and determined that this was one of the best audits among those submitted, provided for potential for significant impact, the persuasiveness of the conclusions, the focus on improving government efficiency and effectiveness, and its clarity and conciseness. So I'd like to congratulate Deborah Jenkins, our internal auditor, for receiving this award on behalf of the city. I think Commissioner Beasley Brown has
Invite 2 important citizens up here with me if you all come up. So these 2 students from Jody Richards Elementary, they gave a poem or presented a poem at our child abuse awareness event yesterday, and it's incredibly powerful. So I invited them to come and start our meeting off with these powerful words. So I'm going to hand my microphone off to them. I'm going to scoot up back so you guys can use it, okay?
Children Learn What They Live by Dorothy Nolte. If children live with criticism, they learn to condemn. If children live with hostility, they learn to fight. If children live with ridicule, they learn to be shy. If children live with shame, they learn to feel guilty. If children live with tolerance, they learn to be patient. If children live with encouragement, they learn confidence. If children live with praise, they learn to appreciate. If children live with fairness, they learn justice. If children live with security, they learn to have faith. If children live with approval, they learn to like themselves. If children live with acceptance and friendship, they learn to find love in the world.
And so sorry, I forgot to mention their names. That was Caitlin Wimpy and Kelly Bryant.
Jehovah's always.
Holy, holy, holy.
Jehovah is always. You hear it? I do not beg, sing praise.
I'd like to mention something. Can I mention something? I want everybody to just remember that this month, the month of April, is Child Abuse Prevention Month, and those two little girls read that yesterday at a proclamation that a fellow commissioner here and I read yesterday. So it's just really important that we're aware and we set the example as a community that we need to protect our children from that. Thank you.
Any other words or recognitions? Mr. Mizel, do you have any comments tonight?
There'll be a need for a closed session. Ashley will read the reasons for the closed session.
Pursuant to KRS 61-810-1B, for the purpose of deliberations on the future sale of real property by the city, as publicity would likely affect the value of the specific piece of property to be sold by the city.
So moved. Second. Nash, second by Denning. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Nash.
Yes.
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Denning. Wilkerson.
Yes. Anything else, Mr. Mizel?
That's it.
Approval of the minutes for the regular meeting on March 19th, 2019.
Moved.
Second.
Motion by Nash, second by Perigin. Any additions, deletions, or corrections? Please call the roll.
Nash.
Yes.
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Denning.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Yes. Municipal Order 2019-47.
Municipal order approving the promotions of Justin Brooks to the position of Assistant Chief of Suppression, Alan Dezern to the position of Company Commander, and Drew Cassidy to the position of Fire Apparatus Operator in the Fire Department.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Denning, second by Perigin. Mr. Mizel.
We recently had the announcement of the retirement of Assistant Chief Jerry Stahl. Want to congratulate Jerry for his long-term service to the city. I think he had 27 years or more, retired as Assistant Chief or Shift Commander. With that retirement comes a domino effect of vacancies or openings at the fire department. I'd like to ask Chief Colson to come make his recommendations for those vacancies.
Mayor and Commission, it's my pleasure to be here this evening to present recommendations of promotion to you for the three positions. Promotional testing for each of these positions was completed in the fall of last year, with 4 members completing the testing process for Assistant Chief of Suppression, 8 members for Company Commander, and 15 members for Fire Apparatus Operator. Promotional testing consisted of a written exam and assessments of the members' performance while conducting various tasks related to the positions which they were pursuing. The fire department works diligently to create opportunities that develop our members and prepare them for the next level of their career. The members I'm recommending for promotion this evening have done just that. They have chosen to take advantage of those opportunities by attending training and completing courses. They've obtained numerous certifications and credentials to validate that they have put the time and effort and possess the knowledge, skills, and abilities needed to advance within the Bowling Green Fire Department. With that, I'm pleased to recommend the following members. For Assistant Chief of Suppression, I'm recommending Justin Brooks. Get Justin to stand, please. Justin has a bachelor's degree from Western Kentucky University. He was hired by the city in 2006, giving him 12 years of service with our organization. He promoted to Fire Apparatus Operator in 2011, and he's been serving as a Company Commander since 2015. Among many certifications and credentials, Justin is notably a certified fire officer, incident safety officer, and a state certified fire instructor. Justin's promotion will create an opportunity or an opening for Company Commander, and I'm pleased to recommend Alan Dezern for this position. Get Alan to stand. Alan attended Lindsey Wilson College. He was hired in 2010, giving him 9 years with the city. He has served as a fire apparatus operator since 2015, and notably, Alan completed officer training school and also is a state certified instructor. Lastly, Alan's promotion will create an opening for fire apparatus operator, and I'm pleased to recommend Drew Cassidy for this position. Drew has an associate's degree from Western Kentucky University. He spent 2 years with the Covington Fire Department before coming to work for the city of Bowling Green in 2013. Drew likewise has completed numerous training courses and obtained certifications as a driver operator. Each of these members have invested in their future as well as the future of the Bowling Green Fire Department and are prepared to serve the citizens of Bowling Green in their new capacity. With that, it's my pleasure to recommend them to you for promotion. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to address those.
Comments or questions? There's just one thing to do, is call the roll.
Nash,
Yes.
Beasley Brown,
Yes.
Perigin,
Yes.
Denning,
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Congratulations to you. Next item is Municipal Order 2019-48.
Municipal order approving the probationary appointments of Courtney Paris to the position of Office Associate Records Division and Kate Kilgore to the position of Office Associate Criminal Investigations Division in the Police Department.
So moved.
Perigin, second by Nash. Mr. Mizel.
I'd like to ask Aaron Holsey, our HR Director, to present these recommendations for appointments at the Police Department.
Good afternoon. Lieutenant Colonel Delaney, can you have Kate and, all right, come on up to the podium so we can see you. Take your time. While they're coming up, would like to introduce the fact that we have 2 office associate positions that became open. One became open due to a retirement, and one came open due to a resignation. We did an external search that included both positions together. 224 completed applications were received. The Human Resources Office reviewed applications, and we mailed law enforcement applications to 80 applicants. 39 law enforcement applications were returned to us and were sent to the Police Department for review. The Police Department selected 14 individuals to complete background checks, and 10 of those applicants were selected for interview. The interview panel consisted of Deputy Chiefs Bowles and Delaney, Assistant Chief Edwards, Courtney Howards from Records, and Tiger Tooley from Human Resources. I would like to recommend Courtney Paris for the appointment of Records Associate position. Courtney has a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from Morehead State University and a Master of Arts degree from Western Kentucky. She has been recently employed at the Forest Park Baptist Church as an administrative assistant and at WKU as an adjunct English instructor. Kate Kilgore is being recommended for appointment to the Criminal Investigations Division as an office associate. She has 2 bachelor degrees, one from WKU and the other from Georgetown College in music performance and music education. Since 2016, Kate has worked at the Graves Gilbert Clinic in both registration and the ophthalmology department. Prior to that, she worked at Kroger in progressive roles of leadership and responsibility from cashier to human resources manager. She describes herself as being very detail-oriented, which is a trait that will be necessary in the role that she will be filling. Do you have any questions?
Comments or questions? Yes, sir.
Aaron, I always kind of ask a few questions every now and then based on the individuals that we hire. The Kilgore lady, was she checked out real good? I mean, did we run all the checks we needed on her?
After the background check came back, we sent it back for another review just to make sure it was good.
That's what I figured. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please call the roll.
Nash,
Yes.
Beasley Brown,
Yes.
Perigin,
Yes.
Denning, Wilkerson.
Congratulations. And please feel free to step out if you've got some celebrating to do. The next item is first reading of ordinance BG 2019, number 12.
Ordinance amending Code of Ordinances. Ordinance amending Chapters 2, Administration, 14, Housing, and 17, Personnel Policies of the City of Bowling Green Code of Ordinances to add language prohibiting discrimination in housing accommodations and employment on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity, prohibiting discrimination in public accommodations on the basis of disability, race, religion, national origin, sex, color, sexual orientation, and gender identity, and providing for certain expectations or exceptions and exclusions to such prohibitions, including an exception of burdening freedom of religion.
So moved.
Second.
By Nash, second by Beasley Brown. I think you're going to introduce this, please.
I am. Thank you, Mayor. LGBTQ individuals are subject to discrimination, including harassment, bullying, and intimidation in Bowling Green, Kentucky. These individuals are often deprived of equal opportunities in employment, housing, and public accommodation. Numerous studies demonstrate that discrimination, especially among those who are school age, has contributed to high rates of absenteeism, dropout, adverse health consequences, and academic underachievement. Statutory protections at the federal level, state level, and in Bowling Green address discrimination only on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, sex, age, familial status, age, and disability. Unfortunately, federal civil rights laws do not expressly protect individuals from discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity. Federal law does not do that. State law in Kentucky does not do that. And Bowling Green law does not do that. Decades of civil rights history shows that civil rights laws are effective in decreasing discrimination because they provide remedies targeted to specific vulnerable groups. While progress is being made in the courts to interpret existing laws to protect LGBTQ individuals, these cases operate on an uncertain timetable, and a final resolution could take many years. This is why updating Bowling Green's non-discrimination law is crucial, and it's why we're here this evening. Everyone needs to be able to earn a living, including people who are LGBTQ. Employees should only be judged on their qualifications, their experience, and the job they do, nothing more and nothing less. The current hodgepodge of legal protections has countless gaps and is difficult to understand, which creates confusion for both employers and legal uncertainty for individual workers who face discrimination. This hodgepodge also contributes to the public's lack of understanding of the need for explicit protections and the extent to which LGBTQ people experience high rates of discrimination at work, in housing, and in public accommodations. I wish the legislators in both Washington and Frankfort would take up this issue, but their failure does not have to be our failure. Nor does their failure in any way excuse me or any member of this commission or any member of this community or prevent any of us from eliminating confusion and uncertainty for the citizens of Bowling Green, which I have been duly represented to elect. This commission has routinely agreed to stay out of Frankfort and Washington's lane. We don't take positions on state or federal issues, but yet now some members are willing to pass the buck to the state or federal governments on this issue. The hypocrisy is obvious and it's disappointing. I encourage my colleagues to stand on the side of civil rights. I encourage my colleagues to ensure that discrimination is not welcome in Bowling Green. Doing so does not interfere with anyone's religious liberty. I want to repeat this. Doing so does not interfere with anyone's religious liberty. But failing to do so does fail to provide safeguards for LGBTQ individuals living in Bowling Green who we all took an oath to represent. It also contributes to the public's lack of understanding of the need for explicit protections. At this time, I will yield the floor, reserving the right to speak again in the future so that we can hear from the citizens of Bowling Green on this important issue.
Now we have an opportunity for you to make any comments with regard to the proposed ordinance, and we'll provide that opportunity. Put your hand down, please, sir. We'll provide that opportunity in a manner that we have done in the past, which is for if anyone wants to sign up to speak, I will call them in the order in which they've signed up. Mr. Childers, who's waving his hand in the background, has the clipboard in which to sign up. He will bring those to me. Like I say, I will call them up in order. We appreciate your being here. We appreciate your comments, and we'll be here as long as it takes to get through these. I will ask you, when we call you up, if you'll come up to the microphone and speak directly into the microphone. I'll identify who you are unless I can't read your name. If you're the next person up on deck, Mr. Childers will have you staged and ready to go. I'm sorry? I will attempt to. And there are people downstairs, I presume, too, who have also signed the list, so we'll have to bring up and down. It might take us a minute to get through them. I would appreciate if you would be kind enough to allow people to get through their comments. We'll give everybody about 3 minutes, and please don't interrupt them. At the end, if you choose to applaud, that's fine. But if you don't mind, on the commission, if we'd let them get through their comments, and if we have any questions, then we'll ask at that point. Just out of respect for the time of everyone, if you would limit your comments to this particular ordinance, and then we'll get started. Anybody have any questions on the board? All right, Mrs. Harston, sir.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
The names on the sheet are the only ones that will be able to speak?
They need to sign up on the sheet so that I know who to call up next. Yes, sir.
When do they need to sign up? Now?
I'm during the have to get Mr. Childers' attention.
Okay.
All right.
Got a question.
First
Do I
up.
need to go sign up before I speak?
Yes, sir. First up is Ms. Harston, Deborah Harston. Thank you.
My name is Deborah Harston, and I'd like to thank Mayor Wilkerson and commissioners for letting me come before you today. First, let me go on record as stating that I am opposed to the ordinance. My main concern with this ordinance is if a man who identifies as a woman uses the women's restroom, locker rooms, showers, dressing rooms, then they are invading the privacy of women and girls, which could be my daughter and my granddaughters. And it would be perfectly legal. There's nothing fair about that. And I ask respectfully that you would vote this fairness ordinance down. Thank you.
Harston. Next up is Jeannie Atwood, please.
Hello, my name is Jeannie Atwood, and as a Christian, I don't believe in harassment or bullying of anyone, but I do want to go on record as being opposed to this ordinance. I too have concerns for my daughter, for myself, and for my other female friends if this ordinance is passed, because it could have an impact on one of the basic privileges of using a public restroom in Bowling Green, as has happened in other areas of the country. I pray, as Pastor Kilgore prayed, for wisdom for you as decision makers. Thank you.
Next up is Richard Nelson. Mr. Nelson.
Thank you, Mayor Wilkerson and Bowling Green City Commission. My name is Richard Nelson. I'm the Executive Director of the Commonwealth Policy Center. We have offices in Frankfort and in Cadiz, Kentucky. I want to go on record as being opposed to this ordinance. First of all, I believe that all human beings have inherent dignity because we're all made in the image of God. I'm for fairness, I'm for equality, and I'm for tolerance. But if this ordinance is passed, it undermines each of these things. A fairness proposal sounds good and it sounds reasonable, but similar ordinances have been used to coerce creative professionals to violate their conscience by conveying messages that they disagree with. Not only is this unfair, but it's dangerous. And such ordinances divide any community. Graphic artists, videographers, and bakers have been fined for refusing to provide their goods or services for homosexual weddings. New York State, Washington, Oregon, right here in Kentucky, we've seen these ordinances used to coerce business owners that are trying to run their businesses according to their convictions. Need to be clear about something. We're not talking about declining services to an individual. We're talking about creative professionals whose conscience forbids them from conveying messages that they disagree with or servicing an event that has deep religious significance to them. When sexual orientation and gender identity become a protected status, it's often used to override another's claim to religious freedom. And Mr. Nash, I respectfully disagree with you on that point. Religious freedom is broad and expansive, and it is protected by the First Amendment. This is something that the U.S. Supreme Court upheld earlier last year with Jack Phillips, who a statewide ordinance was used to coerce him in the operation of his business. It's my understanding that there are no cases of sexual orientation or gender identity discrimination that's been brought to the attention of this body or the local Human Rights Commission. So if there's no discrimination going on, the question is why is it necessary? Bowling Green is a fast-growing city that's very interested in attracting new residents and new businesses, but ordinances that punish business owners for believing in man-woman marriage only serve to divide the community. If this proposal passes, I believe it may eventually be rescinded because right now there is a case pending before the Kentucky State Supreme Court regarding the legality of Lexington's sexual orientation gender identity law. Some of you might recall that Blaine Adamson, a print shop owner there, was found guilty of violating the local fairness ordinance when he declined to fill a t-shirt order for a gay pride event. It was his conviction that he should not use his creative talents to promote a message that he disagreed with that violated his religious convictions. He's been through the court system for 8 years. He's lost countless hours of sleep. He's racked up over $500,000 in legal fees defending his First Amendment rights.
Mr. Nelson, I'm sorry your time is expired.
Okay. Thank you. I thank you again for having me.
Josh Hirschberger. Next up is Jody Tinsley, if you'd like to get ready.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the council this evening. My name is Josh Hirschberger. I'm an attorney. I routinely work with churches and constitutional claims. I'm here this evening representing a ministry here in Bowling Green to express some concerns. My grandfather told me a story recently that really troubled me. He shared with me that one of my ancestors was a Cherokee Indian, and that as part of that tribe, he was forcibly removed from his ancestral homelands in the southeast United States. If you remember that story, they were put onto the Trail of Tears and taken out to Oklahoma. My ancestor escaped, but about 4,000 Cherokees died. As I've studied that story, there was a particular fact that really stuck out to me, and it was this. That was not citizen-on-citizen discrimination. It was an act of Congress, and it was signed into law by President Andrew Jackson. And there was a particular principle that also stuck out from that story, and it was this, that when we're attempting to solve our deepest social and cultural issues, we should be very careful and very circumspect about using the fearsome power of government. And that's something that certainly stuck with me, and I think it applies to this particular ordinance. There's a lot of disagreement about this issue, certainly, but I think we're actually starting from the same place. And it's this principle, that every person is worthy of dignity and respect. Now, we kind of disagree on how that gets applied. And as I look at this particular ordinance, I think it fails that particular test for 3 reasons. The first one is that these types of ordinances have been used around the country to punish those that believe and have a deeply held religious belief about marriage. And I think about 24 different states that have passed these ordinances, many municipalities, and many, many different instances where people have been forced to promote an event or participate in an event that is contrary to their deeply held religious beliefs. Mr. Nelson mentioned Blaine Adamson. I assisted 16 law professors from around the country in submitting an amicus brief in that Supreme Court case. And he employed LGBT individuals. He just said, I can't create a message that is against or contrary to my religious beliefs. There was a statement from the council earlier, which I would just respectfully disagree with, that this doesn't affect anyone's religious liberty. The United States Supreme Court has said that a law just like this one was used to violate the religious beliefs of Jack Phillips in Colorado. So first of all, that's why I believe it fails this test of promoting and ensuring equal human dignity. Number two is that it appears to be a solution in search of a problem. If there are no complaints before this board, if you study the history of non-discrimination laws, you pass something like this, it's almost a statement that there is a citywide, invidious discrimination against those in the LGBTQ community. Now, I certainly have every sympathy for any individual that's been disrespected or mistreated in this community, but this is very specific, actionable discrimination in employment and in housing, and that's just simply not the Bowling Green that I know. This is a beautifully diverse and tolerant city. And finally, I would just say is that there's a better way forward.
I'm sorry, Mr. Hershberger, your time has expired.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Jody Tinsley.
Hello, I'm Jody Tinsley, and I just want to say that I'm all for this ordinance. Love is one word that means so much, and a word that does not discriminate anyone. A word that sweeps people off their feet, male or females alike. And with this said, why is love between same-sex so taboo in our community? Love does not discriminate, and we do not deserve, we all deserve to be happy. Same-sex couples should be able to express their love, and each without their fear of harassment or physical harm. True, some people will say that it's against the Bible and that it is unacceptable. These people should be reminded that America was founded on being free and having the conforms of society. And I think that we as Americans have forgotten that fact. We have forgotten the most 5 important words of America, that all men are created equal. And this is not holding true to Bowling Green today. We should love who we love, and this is our choice, and we should know that no discrimination against anybody for any reason. And I hope that America can soon come to the realization, sooner or later, that love has no gender. Thank you.
Richard Metter. Richard Metter. Okay. Mealer.
Richard Mealer.
Mealer,
A
sorry.
lot of people mistake my last name for Metter, Miller. But I'm here today. I'm here to help out with the community. I'm not against genderisms or anything like that. I believe that everybody is freely equal to who they want to love, to who they want to be with. They shouldn't have to be free. They should be free in this community and shouldn't have to be afraid to allow themselves to be freely opened. I agree with, there are such things as called transgenders bathrooms for gays, lesbians, or hermaphrodites. I think these are all equal people who should have that freely right to be out in the open and shouldn't have to tuck tail and run because this is what the government wants or this is what the state wants. We're all free, we're all equal, we all should be treated as human beings in this community. So I am thankful for being here, and I'm just glad that y'all have heard my statement. And I have been with the community for a long time. I deal with the pagan communities, a lot with the Wiccan communities. To me, everybody is equal in every aspect, and I believe that everybody should be free for their own lifestyles, their own styles of being who they are, or who they want to be, or who they want to love, or who they want to just to be a part of life itself. So thank you very much.
Lydia Billion? Lydia Billion?
Hi there. It was about probably a year and a half ago. I read you all this letter, and I'm going to read it again for a refresher. My parents kicked me out of their house this spring when I finally came out to them. They told me I was going to catch AIDS and burn in hell. I wasn't surprised because I'd been told this all my life at home and church, that homosexuality is a sin. I told them I loved them, packed my clothes, stayed on a friend's couch in a deep depression for a month before I found a job and could start paying rent. My friend secured a job in the kitchen where she served at a local restaurant. It was my first job since my parents had been supporting me, while I was in school at WKU, so I was really nervous. I wasn't used to being on my feet all day, and when I mentioned it to the manager, asking him for suggestions for more comfortable shoes, he told me I was just being a lazy N-word. I didn't even know what to say, so I kept my head down and just kept working. He mostly was nice to me after that, so I tried to forget about it. About a month later, I was on break and telling one of the girls I'd become friends with about my parents kicking me out for coming out, and I didn't realize the same manager was right behind me and overheard everything. When I noticed him, he barked at me and told me that my break was over and I needed to get back in the kitchen. Later, when we were closing down the kitchen, he came back and announced to everyone, "Hey, did you all know he's a F-word?" Pointing at me, and I'm sure you can guess what that F-word is. A few of my coworkers laughed and started asking me inappropriate questions. It was embarrassing, and the manager let it happen. At least 3 times a week, he'd make inappropriate comments and ask questions about my sexuality and sexual activity. I spent most of my breaks in the bathroom crying and hearing from others, "That's just how he is, it's fine. He doesn't mean anything by it." It was exhausting going to work every day knowing that I'd be miserable and harassed. What could I do about it if there weren't any legal protections? Apparently, nothing but quit my job and hope that if I stay in Bowling Green, I'll have jobs where I'm treated like a person instead of an abomination. And this was from a young man who has chosen not to be named. But when he told me this story, that of course broke my heart. And I know that just because things might not affect me doesn't mean it's not affecting others. And that's part of empathy, and that is what this should be about. That's why there's not discrimination against race or religion allowed, because it's about empathy. So this story is not unique at all. And if you haven't heard these stories, then you might want to start opening your ears. And that's why it needs to be the priority of the City Commission to ensure a safe and fair environment. And you can do that by adding sexual orientation and gender identity to the city's non-discrimination policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Wilkerson and members of the commission. My name is Sam Markison. I'm a professor of law at the Brandeis School of Law at the University of Louisville. I've been there for 23 years now. Before that, I spent 8 years in the appellate division of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission in Washington, D.C. I think I can speak to it with some level of experience about matters of discrimination and about the coverage of the laws that apply here in Bowling Green and the gaps in those laws. But before I do that, I do want to say that the last witness that you just heard from, I hope, gives lie ultimately to the false impression that might be left that there isn't a problem, that there are no examples of discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. Of course, we want to believe that we have a fair society, that equality is not only the norm, but the universal norm. But you've just heard that it simply isn't so. You've also heard today that there's no need for this law because there's already coverage supplied by federal law because of the interpretation of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act its coverage for gender to cover sexual orientation and gender identity. The EEOC has taken that position. But it's important to note that while I support that position, and I hope it is ultimately adopted by the United States Supreme Court, that is not currently well-established law. And no person who is the subject or the victim of discrimination here in Bowling Green can count on that actually protecting them because of the uncertainty surrounding that law. Moreover, even if federal law did protect that, the fact of the matter is that federal law protects race discrimination and sex discrimination and religious discrimination. And that is no reason why we shouldn't have state and local coverage. In fact, the whole design, the whole framework of Title VII was so that there would be multiple layers and levels of protection at the state level, at the local level, and at the federal level. The Congress that enacted Title VII in 1964 wanted to give state and local governments the first opportunity to deal with problems so that they didn't have to be handled at the federal level. So this commission should not evade its responsibility, or at least the policy choice, to decide whether this is a kind of protection that should be afforded to the citizens of Bowling Green simply because there might be protection at the federal level. We know that that protection is uncertain, and it certainly doesn't exist at the state level. Finally, I would add that these warnings you've heard about infringements of religious freedom are false warnings indeed. Kentucky has what is known as a Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and nothing the state legislature or this commission can do can take away the protection for religious liberty afforded by that law. Anytime the government burdens religion in Kentucky, the government must show that it has a compelling interest and that the policy it has chosen is narrowly tailored to meet that interest. And so religion is, in fact, protected from infringement by any proposals, by the current existing anti-discrimination law and by the proposed fairness ordinance. And I'll be more than happy to answer any questions the commissioners may have.
Your time has expired. Next up is Lisa Goldie. Is that the right? That's not the right name, is it?
Lisa Goldie.
Goldie, okay.
Yeah, that's the right name. I am trained as a school psychologist and a child advocate, and I want to thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of children, the ones who do not have voices oftentimes in this community. And I want to start out by saying that every single one of us in this room knows someone who is a sexual minority. Not everyone knows somebody with Down syndrome. Not everybody knows somebody with autism. We all know somebody who is a sexual minority. What is it that makes somebody a sexual minority? It's who they love and how they identify. It's not who they have sex with. You know how these kids are growing up with the view that this society has of them? They're feeling like a burden. They're feeling like they don't belong. Because of those feelings, we have increased rates of suicide and increased rates of mental health disorders. Depression, anxiety, substance use disorder. They don't have these problems because of how they identify. They have these problems because of the way our world, our community reacts to the way they identify. Okay, so yes, there are these societal biases. However, we have some protective factors that we can look at. Number one, family cohesion. If you can keep a kid in their home, and if a family is actually okay to love their child, we have pretty good outcomes. If that family does not accept their child, 8-time higher rate of attempted suicide. 8 times, okay? School safety. How do we keep our kids in school? They need an education. They need to be productive members of our society. Well, the schools that have policies that have LGBTQ inclusiveness and are affirming have fewer truancies and have the highest achievement rates of all students, not just those who identify. Okay, now the big factor, and this is where each of you comes in. One of the biggest protective factors, perception of being cared for and about by adults outside of the nuclear family. That's all of us, okay? Every single one of us. We can be those caring adults. Okay, what happens when a child is not accepted into their home once they identify? Well, we heard earlier, the problems that this community has with homelessness. 40% of unaccompanied homeless youth identify. Okay, what is the greatest predictor of involvement in the juvenile justice system? Homelessness. Okay, so now you say, well, just because you're homeless doesn't mean that you need to break the law. They do it to stay alive, okay? Whether it's theft, whether it's drug sales, whether it's survival sex, whatever it is, they have to do what they can to stay alive. They're homeless. Okay, so then once you're involved in the juvenile justice system, how easy is it to find stable housing? How easy is it to find employment once you're released? Now combine that with what you heard earlier about the shortages of affordable housing, and you have pretty much guaranteed housing insecurity for these individuals, maybe not even just immediately, but for the rest of their lives.
Thank you.
Please know that this is the right thing to do.
Diane Taylor. Diane Taylor. Diane Taylor. All right.
Can you say it? Could you say it in the mic?
Diane Taylor.
I'm a short one. Can you guys hear me? My name is Diane Taylor. I'm here as a resident of Bowling Green and also as a small business owner. My daughter Allison and I own Little Fox Bakery right here at 314 East Main Avenue in downtown Bowling Green. We have been open for less than a year, but I am eager to share my thoughts on this fairness ordinance that's being read here for the first time today. I am proud to be both a personal and a business supporter of Bowling Green fairness. As a citizen and a business owner, I know that hard work, determination, fairness, and taking pride in a job well done are the values that drive our city's workforce and help our community thrive. As a small local business owner, I believe our city's policies should reflect these values. And that's why I support LGBTQ inclusive, non-discrimination policies to ensure that all of our workplaces are welcoming to all of our employees and potential customers. Little Fox Bakery is a business that opens its door to the general public. As such, we would no sooner turn away a customer due to sexual orientation or gender identity than we would turn away a customer based on religion or skin color. It has been my experience as well that treating all people fairly is literally good for business. Al's and I went through a long struggle just to get renovations done to open our business. And during that time, we were invited to and we set up at the 2017 Pride Festival. We had a phenomenal experience there. Everyone we met was friendly and welcoming and eager for our shop to open, which we thought would happen sooner rather than later, but it did not. Unfortunately, we went to the Pride Festival the first time in October 2017, and it took us until May 29th, 2018 to finally open our doors. And some of the very first people to walk into our business were the people we had met months ago at the Pride Festival, and they continue to be some of our best customers to this day. We fully intend to keep going back to the Pride Festival again and again because they are some of our best customers, and they have treated us really well. We also feel that engaging with this community is an opportunity for us to expand our business. If gay and lesbian couples come to us for special occasion cakes, we will surely do our best to accommodate them for the same reasons that we would choose to accommodate a customer regardless of race or religion. From a purely business point of view, I have a hard time imagining why any other business owner would not take the same stance. I challenge anyone to present a sound argument for Little Fox Bakery not to sell cookies and cakes to someone who wants to buy cookies and cakes based on who they are or who they love. We opened Little Fox Bakery because we wanted to serve the public, because we wanted to bring a little happiness into people's lives, because we wanted to create an environment where people feel welcome, and because we wanted to give a little something back to our community. But we also operate this business.
Expired.
Oh, all right.
Thank you.
For the record, I support this ordinance and would like to see it passed.
Number 11, you're supposed to, Brent tells me you know your number. Number 11, Lucretia Dye.
Good evening, brothers and sisters. I'm happy to be here, and thank you for this opportunity to speak to you all. I first want to tell a little bit about, I had this long list of readings, but I want to share from my heart. So from my heart, here's who I am. I'm a professor, I'm a researcher, and I'm also a therapist. And I've been a therapist for about 2.5 decades, a mental health therapist. Here's the part that I'm hearing, and I hear a lot of people say here tonight, oh, this is not happening because no one's coming out telling us. Nobody has came here to say this. You want to know why you haven't heard it? Because they're in my office. Everybody who is sharing it is in my office because of what they're experiencing. And the first thing I think about as I'm listening is I think about rights and beliefs and religious beliefs. And I want to share this first of all. My mom is black and my dad is white. According to some of your grandparents and some of your parents and their religious beliefs, I'm an abomination. Y'all get me? I'm an abomination according to some people's religious beliefs because I have a black mom and a white dad, okay? Another thing, if you think about the brain and how the brain is created to be our bodyguard, the number one thing we can do is help people feel safe. The number one thing we can do for mental health and wellness is to offer safety by being able to welcome people and let people be a part of a community. I was thinking about this as everyone was speaking. I was thinking about just growing up and how I used to observe my black uncles and my white uncles, and how my black uncles, because they're black, their existence is a threat in most communities that they walk into. Just their existence. And I think about chronic stress and how it killed my black granddad, and just him trying to get opportunity killed him. And then I think about my white uncles, who most often could walk into a room and be absolute jerks, but because of the color of their skin, they can navigate the room and never have any stress. So I was thinking about that and how that relates to this. And while I don't compare anyone's struggle or say the black struggle is worse than the LGBTQI struggle, the thing that I think about most is, as Christians, this is somebody's son and daughter. This is a human soul before you. And for you to hear stories where they're being persecuted, or I have a mentee couple who trained in our program, a white female and a white female and a black female. You know what they had to do when they moved here? Because they tried to get an apartment together, they had to just say, oh, we're just Western students that are roommates, because they were discriminated against when they were trying to get their apartment. And I just think about just that experience alone, that they couldn't go in and just be who they are, created some stress within them. You know what it is? It's chronic stress. And chronic stress is killing us. Psychological stress is killing us. And those are the people that are in my offices, and that's why you're not hearing from them, because they don't feel safe. So the number one thing we can do is offer an environment where we feel safe. And I think about that. I think about that for my mom and my family. And if you have any questions.
Thank you for your time. Mr. Dearbone, you're next.
I'm Ryan Dearbone, and I am representing the Bowling Green Warren County NAACP. So as a member of the Bowling Green community for almost 20 years, I've seen the incredible strides this community's made, both aesthetically and through diversity and inclusion. Every year we celebrate the different and unique groups we have at the Pride Festival and the International Festival. Events like these make me proud to be a member of the Bowling Green community. I have also been a member of the NAACP for more than a decade. And during that time, I've learned that while we can be a community that talks the talk, sometimes we fail to walk the walk. This is why our branch voted recently to support and lend our voice to the proposed fairness ordinance. This is a topic that's been on the table in the community for several years and has been pushed off the table. We believe that's both unwise and unfair. There's a growing voice in this community that is crying out for equal protection for all citizens, and it seems that voice has largely been ignored over the years. As an African-American man, if racial equality wasn't considered a part of the civil rights ordinance that I live under, it would make me feel that the community that I live in doesn't value me or care who I am. It's the same for our friends in the LGBTQ community. They live here and they contribute to our community with their intellect, their talents, and their finances. So why would we not offer to protect them when it comes to employing and housing? For years, blacks weren't even afforded the opportunity to vote. Blacks were relegated to the lower class housing and oftentimes had to try to get jobs that they were equally qualified for but would not get because of the color of their skin. Our people had to sit in balconies in theaters just so they wouldn't be in the sight of white people. If you wanted to drink out of a water fountain, you had to find one that said colored only. If you want to use the bathroom, you had to find one that says colored only. We've largely moved past those days, but only because it took leaders that realized that we're all the same to break down those barriers, strip down those walls, and allow us to live as one people. We would like to think that including the terms sexual orientation and gender identity in our city's existing civil rights ordinance will remove the unwanted fear that these people in our community experience when applying for a job or trying to find a place to live. These are basic common decencies that should be afforded to those in our community without question and with little discussion. NAACP branches throughout Kentucky have lent their support to similar fairness ordinances in 10 cities. The national NAACP is also in favor of this measure because it is the goal of our system to make sure that everyone is treated equally and fairly, which is the focus of our organization and has been for over a century. I do hope that you'll take a long, hard look at the positives of what passing this measure means not only in the short term, but in the long-term future of our community. As the president of the Bowling Green Warren County NAACP branch, I ask you to end legalized discrimination against the LGBTQ community in our city because, as Dr. Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Mr. Thornton, it's your turn.
My name is Richard Thornton. I'm a proud resident of Bowling Green, Kentucky. I just have a couple of things to mention. I really appreciated Dr. Dye's comments and this attorney's comments over here, the NAACP's comments. I want to talk about the past and the present, just a little bit. In 1967, it was against the law in Kentucky and in Bowling Green for a person of color to marry a white person. Now you say, well, other states were doing that. Yeah, that's right. The whole South was doing that. All of the other states had passed rules and regulations condemning that and allowing it. They did not wait for the Supreme Court. Now you can wait till the Supreme Court. I don't know if the Supreme Court's going to do anything. But I think you have a responsibility to protect all of the citizens. And this is a remainder of the citizens that need to be protected. It's a civil rights issue. The other issue is Sheriff Hightower. You say, why did I bring up Sheriff Hightower? Well, candidate Hightower was at the Pride Festival last time we had. And people were saying to him, you know, you shouldn't be here. And he said, you know what? I want to be the sheriff of everyone, of everyone. And he was there talking to people, finding out what are their needs. And where is candidate Hightower right now? His office is right across the street. Don't wait. Make this a 5-0 vote the next time you vote on this. Show that you support all of the citizens, everyone. Please. I support the ordinance.
This one is number 15, Michael C. Carroll's. I'm sorry? Isaac Keller.
Sorry. My name is Isaac Keller. I'm a student in Western Kentucky, and I do support fairness. I think it's really easy to bring a bunch of like what-if scenarios and hypotheticals and argue against something like fairness. But I think if you were to ask yourself or ask them, what are the historical trends that fairness brings? What are the instances where they actually lead to smaller businesses not succeeding? Or any instance where there are actual discrimination laws or discrimination of religion? I think it's hard to identify those historical trends. And I think that when you have people of the substance and the credibility in this community that come up and speak in favor, people who are literally the leader of the NAACP in Bowling Green and small business owners in Bowling Green, I think it says a lot to the warranting as to why something like this is needed right now, right here. I'm in a class, it's persuasion. We are learning to persuade. And they're the three things that a lot of people in this room are going to know. It's logos, ethos, and pathos. And those are the different forms of like how to make an argument really compelling. A part of the persuasive project, I'm doing it on fairness, is that you have to identify things that are wrong with fairness, or like things that are wrong with your persuasive campaign. I sat in awe the night that I discovered that I was going to do it on this campaign, as I could not identify a single reason, logos, ethos, or pathos, as to why we should not pass this ordinance right now. I think you have an amazing community. I'm from Kansas City, so I'm fresh into this community. But I think we have an amazing community, all of which are arguing something kind of outstanding here, and I think it would be a shame for all of that to go to waste. So I do support fairness.
Number 18, Alex Rivera.
Hi, my name is Alex Rivera. I go to Western Kentucky University. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Bowling Green Fairness Ordinance. So I think that there's been a lot of argumentation as to not having specific examples of sort of discrimination going on. This is something I kind of wanted to shed light on. I do research for the Roosevelt Institute, which is a think tank based in New York, where I'm an intern. And me and Isaac Keller, he just left. But we both have been doing a lot of research about tenants' rights in Bowling Green. I think that there's a very interesting catch-22 where there's a situation where people don't have discrimination protection, which makes it exceedingly difficult to gather information about discrimination, because then when people speak out about landlords, they're able to then be removed from those houses or fired from their businesses. So it makes it extraordinarily difficult, for one, to gather information about these things. And second, because of the way that it's structured with transparency in Kentucky, FOIA requests are, one, extraordinarily difficult to do, require a lot of paperwork. And second, if you don't have the information exactly right, and I'm telling you, it has to be exactly right, it's been so annoying, you will get denied the FOIA request, which makes it exceedingly difficult to gather aggregate data trends as to who exactly is being removed from housing or where discrimination trends are, which means I'll probably have to court scrape during the summer so I can come up with this information. But I promise you, I'll be back with some information next time if this is still not passed. I hope it's passed soon. This is like the third or fourth time that I've had to come up here and do this, so it's starting to feel a little disheartening. But yeah, I speak in support of the fairness, and I think that there is very great evidence that would indicate that there's obvious discrimination. And even if there wasn't evidence, I don't understand what doing something to include protections would do that would necessarily be bad. In debate, we have something called offense-defense paradigm, where you judge whether or not there is a net worse action that will happen as a result of doing something. In this situation, there's almost nothing bad about doing something. So it feels quite baffling to me that people are willing to go for kind of defensive claims that I feel like don't carry a lot of offensive rationale as to why there shouldn't be protections, when it's very clear that there are a lot of people that are suffering right now. So yeah, I shouldn't support.
Take about a 10-minute break.
We'll be coming back in about 10 minutes. If you don't mind waiting for us, we'll be back shortly. Can I get your attention? We'll get back to session. Please have a seat. Thank you. Okay, we do have some seats over here for you to have a seat. I know you've been standing for quite a while. All right, we return, and next up is Daniel Candy.
Hello, I'm Daniel Candy. I'm a student at Western Kentucky University, and I am in support of this resolution. Before I came up here, I had written up a fiery little political snippet, full of brimming youth and radicalism. But after I finished, I realized all of the high-minded ideological scrawl was worthless, because before us we have a very simple moral issue. Who will we protect? The secure or the vulnerable? The powerful or the oppressed? Will our laws, or lack of them, be used to benefit landlords and businesses by giving tacit assent to their bigotry? Or will they be used as a shield to provide security, build a more welcoming community, and to protect people's homes and livelihoods? As elected officials, you all have the power today that you may use for good. The power to protect a class of people who have been vulnerable and been assaulted, kept down, and treated extremely poorly. To prevent fragrant abuses of power and to help take a definite step towards a Bowling Green where LGBTQ people feel safe and secure. Use that power. Do not pretend that passing the buck when you can do good is anything other than moral cowardice. This is fundamentally about fear. And to be completely blunt, the fear of losing one's home or livelihood should supersede the fictitious fear of assaults on religious liberty. Thank you.
Mike Cassidy is number 21. Mike Cassidy. Oh, Dr. Collins, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Dr. Mike Collins. I've practiced medicine in South Central Kentucky. This is my 40th year. But I don't want to address you commissioners as a doctor. I want to talk as an employer to express my concerns about this ordinance as a fixed ordinance and how it would affect me as an employer. I have a very small business, 3 employees, but and I'll say right off the bat that I would not refrain from hiring someone who is gay. I would treat them with respect. I would treat them with positive regard, and I would try to expect the same things out of them that I would out of any employee. The concern that I have deals more with the public and private perception of a community. For example, this is theoretical, but it could very well happen in my case, since I, as I said, would employ someone who is homosexual. There's a difference between a person's private life, which I respect everyone's right to privacy, and a person's public stance and public image. If I have I'm in the business to promote health, good health. And if I have an employee who is taking a public stand, say a gay pride meeting, publicly advocating an unhealthy lifestyle, then I find that conflicting to what I would want the image of my office presented. And I would like to continue to have the option of asking that person to choose between their public advocacy of an unhealthy lifestyle versus their employment in my office to continue whatever they choose privately. And so that's just the point I wanted to make. I feel like as an employer, I would like to be able, if someone is doing something that's against the image I want employed and against the health I'm trying to promote, I want to continue to have the ability to ask that person to choose another place to work. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Collins. I'm sorry, I missed number 20. Forgive me, I skipped over you there. Is it Annika or Anika Smith? Annika.
Hello, I'm Annie Smith. I've been living in Bowling Green for about 4 years now, and I work at Home Cafe. Some of y'all know me. I've probably been a lot of y'all's servers. I've worked at quite a few different restaurants. Basically, I want to go over some facts today and also like my own personal testimony. So I just wanted to come on out and like say, nationally, 9% of LGBTQ folks are unemployed versus 5% of non-LGBTQ folks. Doesn't seem like a huge gap, but I mean, to the folks that are unemployed, it is like. And then in our own state of Kentucky, 38% of LGBTQ people don't have enough money for food versus 21% of non-LGBTQ people. And I've done like a little bit of research on this, wanted to be able to just give straight up facts. Currently, the only statewide protections for LGBTQ people in Kentucky are marriage equality, which is a federal law. That is the only reason we got that. And non-discrimination based on sexuality and gender identity for state employees only at work, passed by Governor Beshear. Those are the only protections we have, which is really funny to me that state workers have that protection, but not regular workers, but that's whatever. This means that LGBTQ people who are not working for the state or just trying to get a house can still be discriminated against, can still be fired, not hired, be evicted, just be chosen not to live in a property because they're LGBTQ, not because they're horrible people or they're rambunctious, just because they're LGBTQ. It's very obvious that this is like correlated with just these really poor conditions that like poverty and not having enough money for food and homelessness that a lot of LGBTQ people are having to deal with. This is a very obvious obstacle up in our way to just being able to work and live like a regular person, which is what most of us just want to do. Like we just want to go to work and then go home, and we deserve to go to work and go home and be really nice. I'm very fortunate currently to have a job that accepts me as I am, doesn't ask me questions about it, doesn't make me talk about it, doesn't harass me about it. Super nice to just go to work and not have to worry about that. That's not always been the case for me though. And when I first came to Bowling Green, I came here for college, went to college for 1 year, went back to live with my dad who is very homophobic. I don't know if he still is to this day, I don't talk to him very much. But was a very homophobic person. I was also a member of the church at the time, regularly voted with the church in terms of church things. I actually held like some positions of authority in my church. The first person that I came out to that was in real life connected to me was my preacher of this church, who expressed like acceptance and was like, no, you are perfectly fine. I won't discuss this with anybody else unless you give me the go ahead to do that, but you're perfectly fine with me. And so, like, that was like, it was just like a big comfort for me, you know.
Ms. Smith,
And,
I'm sorry your time has expired.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, my name's Annika Smith. I support this ordinance.
22 is Howard Bailey.
As a quasi-historian, tonight feels like Jim Crow 2. All of those who were slave owners claimed to be Christians. I think we've got some of their offspring with us tonight. and that was 400 years ago. I know how my parents felt now when they were fighting for integrated schools, when they had a group of people in leadership positions that refused to hear them out, or heard them out but voted the same way. Walking here tonight, I thought of the time that I was working with the Human Rights Commission and came here with Klansmen sitting on both sides of the street. We were getting ready, fighting against to get an ordinance to where adults couldn't wear a mask in parades. Kind of felt that way tonight, and Mr. Denning and I talked at the break, and I'm concerned that possibly here we are many years later, and a black man might be handling the swing vote on whether or not this takes place or not. And we'll go there in a minute. I'm going to ask 3 questions. I don't expect you to answer them, but I speak to the 5 of you. Are you landlords? Are you on the payroll of a landlord? And during your election or re-electing, did you accept donations for your election from landlords? If so, there may be a conflict of interest, and I'm not an attorney. But you've turned this down several times, and I just wonder whose pocket you're in. Thank you.
#23 is Summer Graves. Summer Graves. And Paul, you're next. Right, I mean, so after her, I'm sorry, I apologize. You're on deck.
Hi. We serve you coffee in the mornings. We clean up the plates you and your family leave after a nice dinner at Cheddar's or Olive Garden. We teach at schools in this community. We print your copies at Staples. Some of us are children of God. Some of us children of other religious faiths. We paint the art hanging in some of your homes, and I'm betting you we designed some of the suits of the opposers here today, or dresses. We are gay Americans, we are gay Kentuckians, we are gay Bowling Greenians, and we aren't asking for special treatment, we're asking for equality and fairness, and that's it. It's so simple. It's nothing special. If you want the homeless population to decline, you will give us fairness, because I promise you, as stated earlier, there is a direct correlation. We are the 3rd largest city in this state, yet 10 cities in Kentucky have already passed this. Why not us? Why aren't we leading? I don't understand that. For bathroom warriors, I guarantee you, you're already sharing the bathroom with us in public every day. We're not bothering you, I promise. We really just have to pee. And I also guarantee that all of you have gender-neutral bathrooms inside of your homes. I'm betting you a straight person wouldn't walk up to a gay person and solicit them. Well, as a gay person, I'm not going to walk up to a straight person and solicit you or hit on you. It goes both ways. It's really just as simple as giving us protection. We're not asking for special rights or anything extra. I mean, it's just the same as everyone else. It doesn't matter what we do behind closed doors. A lot of us don't even do much. One of the letters in the LGBTQ is A, which stands for asexual. Those people don't even have sex. I mean, I just hope that you will hear me and know that we're people just like you. We serve you every day. We're all over this city, and we're not going to stop. If you don't let us have our fairness, we will be back. I'm Summer Graves, and I live here in Bowling Green, about 3 blocks away, and I appreciate you guys listening to me today. Thank you. I am definitely in favor of fairness.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, thank you so much. 2008, I was told that I would be ineligible for promotion at Dillard's here in Bowling Green, Kentucky because I'm gay. That same year, I was denied housing. My partner, while I was at work, went to view apartments. He carried our dog through what, by the pictures on the internet, would have been the perfect place for us. Smoked a cigarette with the landlord, and when the landlord was told that I would be living there and that we were partners, suddenly no dogs, no smoking. This is a problem that we have in Bowling Green that we need laws to address. It's a problem that's not reported because who do you report it to? When I was told I would be ineligible for a promotion at Dillard's, I called the ACLU. At the time, Covington, Lexington, and Louisville had fairness ordinances. I had no recourse because Dillard's corporate headquarters is in Alabama with no fairness laws, and my store was in Bowling Green. I ended up quitting that job and going to work at Taco Bell. What are you going to do if you can't get by? The cudgel of religious liberty, and it is a cudgel, is unfair to swing when dealing with laws. Your liberty to practice your religion is not infringed upon by my right to have a house, by my right to have work in which I can advance. There's no conflict. The Jesus Christ that you celebrate that would urge you to deny someone housing, that would urge you to deny someone the right to a job, that is a Jesus Christ that never existed in the Bible. I thank you all for your time. I strongly support this ordinance.
Mark Lord.
Good evening, I'm Mark Lord. I encourage you to oppose this ordinance. Thank you.
Waters, I believe you're next.
Thanks to the commission tonight for this hearing and for allowing the citizens to come and to speak. I wanted to speak for just a couple of minutes. By the way, I'm the president and CEO of the Bluegrass Institute for Public Policy Solutions, and we have an office here in Bowling Green out on Pasco Boulevard. So we are here in the community, and we like being here. And we don't like this ordinance, or I don't like this ordinance. I'm speaking for myself tonight, but this is, I think, an unnecessary government intrusion, and I think it's unnecessarily divisive. What we've heard tonight really is that we don't really have a problem with discrimination here. We heard from a very fine new business owner downtown who said she doesn't discriminate. And I want to compliment her for serving all customers in a fair and an undiscriminatory manner. I think that speaks well of our community. We had the sheriff showing up at the Pride Festival, expressing commitment at that festival. It wasn't like he was trying to hide. He was expressing his commitment there that he is committed to protecting all citizens. Did he make an empty promise? If there are loopholes in the law, then can the sheriff really make that promise if there are loopholes in the law? I'm going to tell you tonight, the Bowling Green that I know would not tolerate and does not tolerate intolerance, bullying, or discrimination against anybody. Now, this is a much better way than passing an open-ended ordinance, which, while I don't question the motivation of the supporters, and Commissioner Nash, I respect you, but I disagree, but I don't question your motivations. I think you have the right motives. But I'm not questioning that. I'm questioning the consequences, especially the unintended consequences. So the Bowling Green I know is better than this. We don't need this law. This law could be used against oppressed business owners. We heard about the oppressed who want to exercise their constitutional freedoms. We heard hypocrisy mentioned here tonight, and I'm closing with this. With all due respect, I think it's extremely hypocritical that many who speak of unity, diversity, tolerance, and love yet support an ordinance that would totally divide us and is very divisive and unnecessary. especially when we already have the community, the citizens, the business owners, the workers, the pastors, the laws, the law enforcement, the lawyers, the men, the women, the young, the old, the whites, and the blacks standing here saying we refuse to discriminate, refuse to have a bigoted spirit. Our citizens are already enforcing fairness. Why don't we trust them instead of opening the door to an ordinance that punishes T-shirt designers or bakers or florists? Thank you very much.
Thirty-three, Kim Lindgren.
My name's Kim Lindgren, and I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak here tonight. You know, in my everyday life, in my everyday worries, one of the things that I don't worry about is being discriminated against. I'm a white female who says what she thinks, so I'm not afraid to stand up for myself. But there are a lot of people in this room who that is part of their everyday worry, and that's why I'm here. You know, in the workplace, all I care about is that my fellow employees show up to work and do their work well. That's all I care about. I don't care about, I care about them as individuals, but what you do in your private life, the choices that you make, you know, as long as you're happy, as long as you can answer that question, are you happy? Yes. And is what are you doing causing harm to yourself or others? No. You know what? I'm pretty okay with it. I think this fairness ordinance is necessary. It's necessary to continue being the vibrant and diverse community in which we live. I've been here since 1985, since I came to school to go to Western, and I talk often about how I'm proud of this community. This community is filled with good people who, in their everyday lives, in their course as business owners, as employers, you know, would never feel that they would discriminate. But to think that discrimination is not out there, that it doesn't happen in the workplace, that it doesn't happen in housing, well, I would love to live in a Bowling Green where I think that that doesn't happen. But unfortunately, I think that it does. And I think it's the responsibility of elected officials to stand up and say that those things are wrong, that I represent this community, I represent you, and that I am going to take a stand that discrimination is wrong for all people of all genders, races, sex. You know, I think there are many of us who take that sort of thing for granted. You know, we all have things that we take for granted. You know, it was talked about how this ordinance would be divisive. Well, you know, I think disagreeing is not wrong. Disagreement and open discussion like this is healthy. We need to have this because that's part of being a citizen in our democracy. I don't take for granted the power of what I'm getting to do now. There are a lot of people in a lot of places who would give anything to be standing here right now and telling their elected official what they think is right for their community. And that's something I think a lot of people take for granted. But the ordinance that you have before you, you have a unique opportunity to do something that many elected officials would love to do. You get to add something to a public policy that creates inclusiveness in our community and doesn't have a financial component to implement. Think about all of the things the government tries to do that says we can't do that because it costs too much money. Well, that's not an argument here.
Your time has expired.
Okay. Thank you, and I ask you to support this ordinance.
Phil Buckner.
My name is Phil Buckner. I'm a longtime resident of Bowling Green, a graduate of Western, and a longtime pastor. I've been in the ministry for over 45 years, and I just wanted to encourage you to vote against this ordinance and not pass this. As a pastor, I minister to all kinds of people and have always tried to be fair and feel like I have been. But I can see a lot of problems with an ordinance like this. I don't have any official capacity to speak, so that I'm an independent Baptist, and that's why we're independent. Nobody speaks for us. We speak for ourselves or our church. But I think I can safely say that I represent the position of most of the independent Baptist churches and people that I know in this area. Probably the majority, if not 100%, would say we don't need this ordinance. And now, my concern, Commissioner Nash, is one that we've heard voiced today, but I'd like to reemphasize that. I know you say that this will not affect religious liberty, but and I know that probably that may be the intent. But it's been my experience, I'm retired now from the ministry, but it's my experience in working with all types of things, that once you start something, it's very easy to take the next step. Now, I'm very concerned about the presence of a codified rule like this that could be used the wrong way, or down the way it could be added to or changed in a way that would affect even churches and ministries, as well as individual Christians that have strongly held convictions. And in spite of the state protections that we know, someone mentioned that earlier, and I understand that, but nobody's addressed the fact that most people do not want to go to all the trouble and expense that it would take to defend themselves once they get into an issue like this. It's very difficult, even though the right may be on their side, and eventually they come out the right way or the way that they would want, but the problems and expense to go through that process sometimes cause you to just throw up your hands. And so it's could be a burden to ministries, churches, individual Christians that I think could be a real problem. And I encourage you to not pass this ordinance. I don't believe Bowling Green needs it, and I don't think it's something that is really necessary. So I thank you for allowing me to speak, and encourage you to vote no on this. Thank you.
Michael Wade.
No 35, Your Honor. 36 will be the next speaker.
Jennifer Thomas.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Hunley Batts Thomas. I've been a resident of Bowling Green for 29 years. I moved here to attend Western as a 17-year-old, and I fell in love with this city, and I'm still here. It was 15 years ago, the first time I entered this room to speak on the issue of fairness to the mayor, to the then mayor and commissioners. I'm now a candidate for ministry with the Unitarian Universalist Association. I'm a public school teacher. I teach middle school now. And I'm not going to share anything with you that you haven't heard from me previously or heard from the speakers tonight. What I do want to do is take just a moment and stand before you as a neighbor and a sister, as a mother, a teacher, and as a voter who does not miss an election. Our neighbors, no matter who they love and how they live, need us. And we all need you to be on the right side of history. And so I'm here to ask you to please finally vote for fairness.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, thank you for having this. I'm speaking for the ordinance because I think it's wrong as Americans to oppose things that people cannot choose. We don't choose our skin color, we don't choose our parents, and we don't choose our sexual orientation. It's something we realize over time, it's a private thing. We don't choose who we love. And as Thomas Jefferson might say, something somebody else does that doesn't harm me, doesn't break my leg or pick my pocket, it's none of my business. So I think really it's un-American to oppose something like sexual orientation. There's been a lot of confusion about it over the years, and a lot of people don't think it's not something you choose, but it is. It's something you can't help any more than you can help your skin color or your parents. So I ask you to pass it. It's a simple thing. You're not going to hurt anybody, and you're going to help a lot of people.
Celeste Jackson.
Good evening. That should be Reverend Jackson. My name is Celeste Jackson. I'm a minister. I'm speaking on behalf of the ordinance. I speak on behalf of my daughter, my granddaughter. I speak on behalf of my niece. I speak on behalf of my friends, my best friend, who has been a transgender person for the last 20-odd years, who shared my home. I have never heard of an incident in which a transgender person has even touched another person in a restroom, ever. So there is no record of that. There's nothing to fear. I don't know about you, but when I am in the bathroom, the only thing I'm worried about is going in the stall, doing my business, and leaving. I don't look in the doors to see who's there because I'm not afraid of a transgender person. There's nothing to fear. They are people just like you and me. As a person with a minor in human sexuality, I know for a fact that sexual identity cannot be chosen. It's already born in you. It's something that you cannot choose. No more than I could choose to be completely straight. I am. That's me. However, I do know people who do not share my orientation. I don't fear them because I know that they are their authentic selves, and that's what we should be, is our authentic selves. And an ordinance that allows a person to be their authentic self can only help and not harm the community. Discrimination against anyone for any reason is the wrong thing. And if you're pleading Christianity, I might remind you that Jesus told you to love your neighbor. He didn't give any exceptions. He didn't stutter, no exceptions, no anything. Even the Bible in the Old Testament said that God told you that you should love the foreigner as yourself and should protect those who walked among you who were defenseless. So when we're thinking about Christianity, which, by the way, has no place in our government because we are not a Christian nation, we need to think about that. We need to think about walking with and protecting those who are oppressed and who have no voice. Thank you.
This is the last speaker that we have registered. If there's anybody else that wants to speak, Mr. Childers has the sign-up sheet there. So anyone else? All right, then this is the last speaker. And your name, please?
My name is Lauren McLean. Before, I didn't prepare any remarks today, but I wanted to respond to a few things that I heard today. First of all, there is nothing unhealthy about being gay or lesbian, transsexual, bisexual, any of those things, transgender. Not at all. The thing about it that's unhealthy is discrimination. It's that chronic stress that Dr. Lucretia Dye talked about earlier today. It's about worrying whether you're going to be kicked out of your house or fired from your job. That is what is unhealthy about it. There's nothing inherently unhealthy about being a member of that community. Second of all, discrimination happens in this city. We all know it happens. People around this room have talked about it. It happens, period. Religion. If your religion causes you to not want other people to be treated fairly, maybe you should find another religion. But I'm here today with my son. He's 6. And on the way here, when we talked about why we were coming, I told him, I'm sorry, I'm crying, but I told him that all people should be treated fairly, and he knows that. At 6 years old, he knows that all people should be treated fairly, period. And he knows that you don't discriminate, and you are friends with everybody, and you protect everybody, and you stand up for people who don't have a voice. And if at 6 years old he knows that, I would highly expect the elected officials in the city to know that as well. And so I really hope that you support this ordinance, because I want my son to know that he lives in a community that also believes that everybody should be treated fairly. Thank you.
Hang on just a second. Brent, would you mind bringing me the list when you get done? Thank you.
I'm Deanie Oliva, the Reverend Dr. Claudine F. Oliva, and I give you my credentials because I would hope that we are a community that understands that not every religion, not every pastor is against this ordinance. I have heard repeatedly that the pastors of Bowling Green do not support this ordinance. I'd love to know where that information came from. Did we take a survey? I don't think so. As a member of this religious community, I know many pastors who very much want this to be passed. So please, let's not hear that again, that the pastors of Bowling Green do not want it passed. We do. We do. My name is Deanie Oliva. I support this ordinance. I am the affiliate minister at the Unitarian Universalist congregation here.
I can't quite make out the first name. Is it West? Is that correct?
Sis West, yes. Hi, my name is Sis West. I've lived here since 2012. I grew up in Franklin, Kentucky, so I was kind of in the area my whole life. I'm a local musician and visual artist, so I tend to interact with many of the community members in various events and things going on around town. I don't really have much prepared to say other than just I support this ordinance because it shouldn't be, even at this point in time, historically speaking, it shouldn't be a case as to whether or not we support equality for all people. We're all human beings. We all carry value within us innately, and I think that's something we can probably all agree on and isn't a divisive factor for us. Also just wanted to speak to the legality matters that were addressed earlier by some of the speakers. If you don't discriminate against anyone, then you shouldn't have anything to worry about, legally speaking. Just wanted to mention that. And that's all I have to say. Thank you. I'm in support of the ordinance.
Don Williams.
I'm Yvonne Williams. I'm an associate minister here in Bowling Green, and I ask you all to vote no to this ordinance.
Joshua Finn is our last public speaker.
Hello, my name is Joshua Finn. I was born here in Bowling Green on Hospital Hill. Grew up in Franklin. I've been a back and forth resident for both communities for my entire life. I work as a server in a local restaurant. I also perform as a drag queen entertainer on the weekends here in town. And I'm also a religious studies scholar who graduated from WKU. Any thing the religious groups want to bring up saying how discriminating against the LGBTQ community is biblical, I can have a rebuttal for every single of the 6 verses out of all of the entire Bible. There's only 6 verses that are against, that are translated to be anti-gay. and all of those have been mistranslated. Jesus never spoke a word about gay people. And I've also, as a server in the restaurant industry, experienced discrimination of my own. I have been forced to quit jobs, or otherwise I would be fired due to being gay. I encourage you to vote yes for fairness, and that's all I really have to say. Thank you all.
As public speaker, at this point, we'll open it to the floor. Did you want to start, Slim?
I'll pass to Dana if she would like to go first.
I have some just follow-up questions for some of the speakers, if it'd be okay. Professor, would you mind stepping up to the podium? I have a couple of questions for you, because you had mentioned the religious protections at the state level. And so I wanted to, it seems to me in terms of the main concern for passing this ordinance is that folks are worried about their sincere religious beliefs and being forced to do things that would go against their conscience and their religious beliefs. And our ordinance has in it language protecting folks who have religious exemptions, and it's my understanding that it mirrors the language at the state level. So can you talk to me a little bit about are we giving people who of certain sexual orientation or gender identity more rights than folks who have a religious exemption, or is this bringing this up to the level of protection already given to those who have religious exemptions?
There has certainly been a concern expressed, as you've heard tonight, but in the past as well, about the extension of or application of anti-discrimination laws to those with sincerely held religious beliefs. It is as a result of those concerns and some of the weaknesses in the protection the First Amendment has been interpreted to provide by the Supreme Court of the United States, that states all across the country, as well as the United States Congress, passed statutes called Religious Freedom Restoration Acts, designed to strengthen the protections for religious liberty, because we do care, and properly so, about the importance of people's ability to express their religion, live their religion, and not have those religious rights infringed. Those Religious Freedom Restoration Acts provide enormously effective protection. It is as a result of those laws, for example, that the Supreme Court, right or wrong, whatever any of us might feel about it, decided the Hobby Lobby case, protecting the right of Hobby Lobby to have its policies when it came to contraception. And so the point is, these laws have been, these Religious Freedom Restoration Acts have provided the kind of protection from the application of statutes like anti-discrimination laws that certainly contradict the claims you've heard tonight about fears of those in the religious community. And I'd add just one more thing. We heard many of the same arguments made during the marriage debate, both when the marriage amendment was passed in 2004 and in opposition to the legal case and the Supreme Court's decision on marriage equality. The argument was ministers and churches that did not believe in same-sex weddings would be forced to perform them. And during that debate, whenever I was in a debate with someone on the other side, I would say that if any minister, any church was ever compelled, or someone tried to compel them to perform a wedding that was against their religious beliefs, that I would pro bono defend that church or minister. Because, A, I believe in religious liberty, but also because I knew that it was never going to happen. And it never has. In the more than 15 years since Massachusetts became the first state to recognize same-sex marriage, not a single Catholic priest, not a single evangelical Christian minister has been forced to perform a same-sex marriage anywhere in the United States. It has not happened in Massachusetts. It has not happened anywhere in the country since the Supreme Court's Obergefell decision. So these warnings about these major threats to religious liberty we have heard time and again when it came to protections for gay men, lesbians, bisexual, and transgender individuals. Those threats have been empty threats.
I also have a question about whether or not this is necessary, and talking about the EEOC and how they have ruled that sex may include some of these protections. And so could you explain to me sort of why a community like Bowling Green would want to include this in their protected classes, and I guess maybe the benefit of a Human Rights Commission in terms of a service to our citizens if there are complaints made for either side, whether it's a false claim or true discrimination?
Sure. There are several reasons. As I testified earlier, the EEOC guidance is not final, that sex discrimination under Title VII actually applies to sexual orientation and gender identity. While many of us hope that the Supreme Court will eventually decide that that guidance is correct, that's an uncertainty at this time, and no one can predict that. So having this protection to provide protections for gay men, lesbians, bisexual, and transgender citizens of Bowling Green will fill that gap that currently exists. Just as important, the EEOC, like many government agencies, is not the most efficient operation in the world. Okay? I worked at the EEOC for 8 years, was proud of what we did there, but the backlog of charges that the EEOC has in all areas of discrimination is mind-numbing. And if somebody has a charge, either they file or that is filed against them, to get it into the EEOC process means they're going to be stuck there for a long time. That's one of the reasons that the Congress was wise in 1964 in giving the first crack at adjudicating any claim of discrimination to state and local governments, because they would be closer to the problem and able to deal with situations before they ever became what we might call a federal case. So the whole structure of Title VII is to defer to state and local agencies if they protect on a given characteristic. The first crack goes to the state or local agencies. And if that protection exists here in Bowling Green, they never have to get to the federal agency. The EEOC never has to get involved, and it can be resolved at the local level, perhaps with a finding of no discrimination, or perhaps, unfortunately, we would hope not, but with a finding of discrimination if it actually occurred.
Thank you for answering my questions. I appreciate it. And I just have one question for Dr. Dye as well.
Brothers and sisters.
So you mentioned that as a mental health professional that that our community is coming to you and expressing that they are facing discrimination. And so I just wanted to make sure I understood you correctly, that there are people in our community who are impacted by this currently.
I agree with that there are people in this community that are impacted currently. And I want you all just to think about, if you are under threat, do you go to the people or individuals that you feel threatened by? I'll give you an example. I was a high school counselor, and I remember, this was just a few years ago, as a high school counselor, one girl came to my office one day and she came out to me and she saw that I didn't have a reaction. I said, okay. So then all the students, and there were so many, you all, that started coming to my office because it was safe. So I don't know why any individual would go somewhere that they don't feel safe to report. And we know there's a history of that. When we try to go report, and if we don't feel safe or accept it, we're not going to go there. So yes.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else have any questions before I make a statement? Anybody else have any questions? Okay. I want to talk to those who oppose this ordinance first. First, I want to acknowledge the fears that I've heard expressed from citizens who are worried about losing their small businesses because of their faith. As a woman of faith, as a mom, and just being real honest, as the sole option for providing health insurance for my family, I understand the fear of possibly losing your livelihood because of your religious beliefs. And I would never want to push our families into hardships, especially families who have taken that risk of starting a small business to put that at risk. The exemption language that I wanted to make sure I understood correctly in this ordinance affirms and is required to conform to the state-level Religious Freedom Restoration Act, known as RFRA. I would like to share a statement about state RFRAs from Travis S. Weber, Esquire, the director of the Center for Religious Liberty at the Family Research Council. He states the following: states' religious freedom restoration acts protect people of all faiths whose sincere beliefs are in danger of unnecessarily burdened by the government, while winnowing out those using religion as a pretext to escape application of general laws. Americans of all political persuasions and all religions who care about individual freedom of belief in the face of increasing government coercion should support RFRAs. And I'm continuing to quote him. The law's text and our long history of analyzing religious claims show that RFRAs are the best protection for everyone, allowing people of all beliefs to continue living free of intrusive government. And that's the end of his statement. There is no doubt, if this ordinance becomes law, your right to freely practice your faith will not be infringed upon. Next, I want to address the concern that this ordinance overcomplicates things. Adding sexual orientation and gender identity to our list of protected classes allows our local Human Rights Commission to provide an important service to our businesses and neighbors they currently cannot. Regardless of what is decided at the state or federal level around LGBTQ rights, if we do not adopt a local fairness ordinance, either businesses who are unfairly targeted by a false discrimination claim today, like was mentioned, will face over a year backlog before their case is even introduced at the federal level, and even longer to be dismissed. This will cause businesses to lose money as they are tied up in litigation. We don't have to make our citizens endure that. If we adopt the Fairness Ordinance, our local Human Rights Commission can act quickly and either dismiss a case if there is a false claim or resolve claims of actual discrimination through mediation without dragging anyone to court. Adopting this ordinance actually simplifies the process for businesses in our community and allows our city to provide this service at a much more efficient rate than the state or federal government can. I think any time that we can resolve issues locally and more efficiently, that is a win for our community. Next, I want to address the concern about negatively impacting the business climate. If we want to give future generations a high quality of life, it is very important that Bowling Green remains competitive in our fast-changing economy. We are in a new business climate. These days, businesses are looking for cities who protect their employees and customers. Potential newcomers are looking for communities that value equality and protect them and their children from discrimination. Studies show that cities and states that do not have comprehensive anti-discrimination laws that include LGBTQ persons are losing millions in lost revenue because of it. In an open letter to lawmakers, over 120 CEOs, many of which do business in Bowling Green, stated the following: discriminatory laws make it far more challenging for businesses to recruit and retain the nation's best and brightest workers and attract the most talented students from across the nation. They also state the business community, by and large, has consistently communicated to lawmakers at every level, like this evening, that such laws are bad for our employees and bad for business. Continuing with their letter, they state, this is not a direction in which a state or a city moves when they are seeking to provide successful, thriving hubs for business and economic development. They claim in this letter it will also diminish the draw as a destination for tourism, new businesses, and economic activity. As a city commission, we have been provided a list of local businesses who support the Fairness Ordinance, and I see many companies listed here that are anchors of our downtown development and our community at large. I cannot find any evidence, and I looked very hard, that passing this Fairness Ordinance will be bad for business. In fact, I found lots of evidence that our local economy is losing millions by not passing it. And I would be happy to point you to those studies if you're interested. Finally, the most important reason I am compelled to support it is our children. As you've heard tonight, teen suicide rates for LGBTQ youth is shocking. A US study found that gay and lesbian young people are 4 times more likely to contemplate or attempt suicide compared with the general population, while trans youth are 10 times more likely to do so. As someone who works in the schools and with children every day, I know this to be true. And as we've listened to mental health professionals here, that we absolutely do have children, because we have not passed this, are struggling. If we can do something together to reduce teen suicide in our city, we should do it. And we have the power to do something tonight. Studies from John Hopkins and the University of Michigan Schools of Health have shown that when communities pass laws that affirm the basic human rights and dignity of LGBT persons, teen suicide rates drop dramatically. If we can save the lives of our children by declaring simply that we believe that all our citizens deserve basic human rights, I believe that is the moral and right thing to do. And before we vote, I want to speak directly to the LGBTQ youth who are here tonight. No matter how this vote ends up tonight, I want you to know that this city commissioner thinks that you are beautiful and you are wonderfully made just as you are. You are a gift to our city, and I cannot wait to see the ways that you use your unique gifts to change the world. You are a citizen of Bowling Green, and you deserve human rights. And I am proud to vote yes for this city to finally give you the freedom and equality every citizen in our city deserves. Thank you.
Comments from any of the other commissioners? All right, Slim, you're up.
2 things, and I'll wrap this up. I appreciate my colleagues hanging in here for a longer than normal meeting. I appreciate the citizens for showing up and expressing your concerns, your ideas, your opinions related to this very important issue. I appreciate the very impassioned plea of Commissioner Dana Beasley Brown. The mayor was kind enough to share with me that of those who spoke this evening, there were 11 people who asked that the ordinance not be passed, and there were 24 who asked that the ordinance be passed. Take that for what it is. It includes just the people who were able to be here at a meeting that started at 4:30. It took, you got to take into account where everybody else needs to be on a Tuesday night. But if my math is right, and I'm not the best at math, that's a majority of those who spoke out who wanted to see this ordinance passed. Two comments, and then I'm done. Equal rights versus special rights. I've heard that this evening, some. I've received a few texts about that over the last couple days, and I have not had the opportunity to have a conversation with each person who has talked to me about equal rights versus special rights. But of those that I have, I've asked them what they thought of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. I asked them if they opposed the Religious Freedom Restoration Act when it was considered by the state. Not one of those people who argued equal rights versus special rights told me that they were opposed to the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Every one of them said that they were for it. That is a law that is designed specifically to protect people who believe a particular religious thought. If we really want to argue, and I don't, but if you really want to argue equal rights versus special rights, I ask you when you leave here this evening to consider, on balance, a fairness ordinance with a Religious Freedom Restoration Act. To Mr. Waters, we go back a long way. Mr. Waters was a reporter when I first started running for office, and he was kind enough not to print every single thing I said. Having said that, one of the things that you said, there were a multitude of things that you said, and while I respect you, most of them I disagreed with. We have that kind of relationship, and we're able to do that with one another. But one of the things that you said was that there isn't a problem, that you heard in this community all the loving comments that came from the dais that there wasn't a problem. Before this new debate came up, last week, when I asked that this be put on the agenda, it was not too long ago. I was at a gas station here in Bowling Green, and while pumping the gas, a gentleman came up from behind me and said, "Slim," and I said, "Yes," and he said, "I didn't know you were gay." And I said, "I'm not." And are there children in the room? There are a few. All right. And for those that are watching on TV, I'm going to say exactly what he said to me because it makes the point. I said, "I'm not." And he said, "Then why are you risking your political career for a bunch of faggots?" Public gas station with other people around. And I said, "Please, I'm happy to engage in this conversation with you, but please don't use that kind of language." And he said, "What language?" He wasn't being smart. He wasn't being a smart aleck. He genuinely did not understand that the use of the word faggot was derogatory. If that gentleman feels that way and that comfortable to speak to me at a gas station, I can't imagine what goes on when no one's looking. Finally, and I want to make this point because Commissioner Denning and I have had discussions about the difference between the civil rights movement of the 1960s and the gay rights movement of present day. And I speak about this as a white male who wasn't alive for the civil rights movement, who has been born with the privilege of being white and having all the privileges that come along with that. That's my disclaimer. I believe that the black civil rights movement of the 1960s is not exactly the same as the LGBTQ civil rights movement of present day. African Americans in Jim Crow couldn't vote. They couldn't stay in hotels and they couldn't eat in restaurants. But if you're gay and you keep your orientation private, even when keeping that orientation, I recognize, is a difficult thing to do. It's a painful thing to do, to hide who you are. But if you are to hide that, then you can still vote, you can sleep in hotels, and you can eat in restaurants because nobody will know. African Americans and other people of color do not have such a choice. They are identified from a distance. So while I agree that the black civil rights movement of the 1960s is not exactly the same as the LGBTQ civil rights movement of present day, the act of discrimination is very much the same. So let's separate the issues. They are not the same. They carry with it all kinds of different connotations, but the discrimination is still that, discrimination. John Lewis, a Georgia congressman and a revered icon of the black civil rights movement in the 1960s, who suffered brutal arrests and savage beatings, who knows far more than I do about the civil rights movement, is on record as saying he fought too hard and too long against discrimination based upon race and color, not to stand up and speak about discrimination against his gay and lesbian brothers and sisters. Again, I don't want you to confuse what I'm saying. I believe that the black civil rights movement of the 1960s is not exactly the same as the LGBTQ civil rights movement of present day. But the act of discrimination is very much the same and sadly is very much alive. I yield the floor.
All right, before we take a vote, I just want to give the audience a heads up. We'll be taking just a couple of minutes recess for those who choose not to stay for the remainder of the meeting. We've got 18 more items on the agenda, and members of the media, I apologize, but we won't be available for interviews till we get done with the meeting. So we've got a lot to do tonight. So, but we will take a moment for those who choose to find something else to do this evening. So any other comments? If not, please call the roll.
Nash.
Yes.
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Perigin.
No.
Denning.
No.
Wilkerson.
No. We'll take just a few moments, and if those who want to leave are welcome to do so. back to our meeting we're at item number 4 on our list, which is ordinance BG 2019, number 6, our second reading.
Ordinance creating franchise relating to telecommunications system. An ordinance creating and establishing for bid a non-exclusive telecommunications or related non-cable franchise for the placement of facilities for the generation, transmission, distribution, and sale of telecommunications or related non-cable services within the public rights-of-way of City of Bowling Green for a 10-year duration, and providing for compliance with other relevant laws, regulations, standards, and ordinances, definitions, work, materials, and construction standards, wire moving and tree trimming, indemnification, insurance, access to property and inspections, notice of filings with the Public Service Commission, no vested rights, limited assignment, notice of foreclosure and bankruptcy, cancellation or termination, violations and penalties, permitting and inspection fees, additional permitting and other requirements for substantial new construction and bid requirements, all effective on date of passage.
So moved.
Second.
Perigin, second by Denning. Mr. Meisel, you got anything to add to our comments from last time?
All right, Gene?
And this is second reading. This is telecommunications only, not cable television. After this, we will now advertise this and give interested parties an adequate time to response, and then we'll be back to you in a few weeks with another ordinance accepting whatever responses we get.
Can you expand, tell the public what the difference is between cable and telecommunications, just in a brief?
Telecommunications will include things like internet service, which I think is what this company is particularly interested in. Could also include telephone, just things like that, communication, voice communication, data transmission. But under this proposal, they cannot provide cable television.
Thank you.
Comments or questions? Please call the roll.
Nash,
Yes.
Beasley Brown,
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Denning.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Second reading of ordinance BG 2019, number 7.
Ordinance rezoning real estate. Ordinance rezoning a tract of land containing 0.7002 acre from HP Highway Business to RM4 multifamily residential located at 3885 Old Nashville Road, Loop 1, presently owned by Elijah Properties LLC.
So moved.
Second.
Perigin. Second reading of a recommendation from Planning and Zoning. And any further comments or questions? Please call the roll.
Nash,
Yes.
Beasley Brown,
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Denning. Wilkerson.
Second reading of ordinance BG 2019, number 8.
Ordinance rezoning real estate. Ordinance rezoning a tract of land containing 6.5 acres from GB General Business to PUD Planned Unit Development located at 618 Lovers Lane, presently owned by Preparo 2 Bowling Green LLC.
So moved.
Perigin. Second reading of a unanimous recommendation from Planning and Zoning. Are there any further questions? Please call the roll.
Nash,
Yes.
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Denning.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Yes. Ordinance, second reading of ordinance BG 2019, number 9.
Ordinance rezoning real estate. Ordinance rezoning a portion of a tract of land containing 0.2763 acre from RS1A Single Family Residential to GB General Business located at 0 Memphis Junction Road, presently owned by B&B Cleaning Company Incorporated, care of Bruce Zachary.
So moved.
Second.
Perigin, second by Nash. Unanimous recommendation from Planning and Zoning. Are there any further comments or questions? Please call the roll.
Nash,
Yes.
Beasley Brown,
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Denning.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Yes. Second reading of ordinance BG 2019, number 10.
Ordinance rezoning real estate. Ordinance rezoning a tract of land containing 14.20 acres from HB Highway Business to LI Light Industrial located at 0 Nashville Road, presently owned by 979 LLC, care of Tommy Hunt.
So moved.
Second.
Perigin, second by Denning. Recommendation from Planning and Zoning. Are there any further comments or questions? Please call the roll.
Nash,
Yes.
Beasley Brown,
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Denning.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Second reading of ordinance BG 2019-11.
Ordinance rezoning real estate. Ordinance rezoning tracts of land containing 39.11 acres from AG Agriculture RM3 multifamily residential HB Highway Business and F floodplain to RM4 multifamily residential HB Highway Business and F floodplain located at 0 Veterans Memorial and 2337 Russellville Road, presently owned by Keystone Development Group LLC, care of Matthew Tabor.
So moved.
Second.
Perigin, second. Positive recommendation from Planning and Zoning on a 5-4 vote. We had considerable discussion last time. Any further comments or questions? Please call the roll.
Nash,
Yes.
Beasley Brown,
Yes.
Perigin,
Yes.
Denning, Wilkerson.
Municipal Order 2019-49.
Municipal order authorizing and accepting bid number 2019-51 for fiscal year 2019 stormwater mitigation program from Scott and Ritter Incorporated of Bowling Green, Kentucky, in the amount of $149,915.
So moved.
Perigin, second by Denning. Mr. Mizel.
We recently issued bids for the stormwater project that's out off Blue Level Road around McCausland and Rodeo Lane. We've got a map in your packet if you want to kind of get an idea where it is. We went out for bid, got 2 bids, and this is a low bid, recommending Scott and Ritter, $149,915, and Greg Meredith is here if you have any questions about this project.
Comments or questions? Call the roll.
Nash,
Yes.
Beasley Brown,
Yes.
Perigin,
Yes.
Denning,
Yes.
Wilkerson.
2019.
Municipal order approving purchases for golf course improvements at Riverview Golf Course from Par Lane Outdoor Solutions of Alvaton, Kentucky, Jackson Sand of Jackson, Tennessee, and Champion Turf Farms of Bay City, Texas, in the total amount of $175,750.
So moved.
Second.
Perigin, second.
We are underway at Riverview on the course renovations. We have cleared some trees. Mike's been down there, Mike Mitchum, overseeing that project. We are well underway on the driving range, and have also received a design on the nets to know how high to place the nets. And proceeding with that, we have realized, though, that in order to get the course sprigged with Bermuda, there's a tight window of weather time with the temperatures. That has to be done by July to get that grown in if we're going to have a open course by the end of this calendar year. With the challenge of bidding all this out, as a complete project, we have decided that it is best to bid out the labor and the equipment, and so we have gotten bids on the greens to reconstruct those. There's 3 greens we're going to have to recontour and get ready for the Bermuda to be sprigged. And with the Bermuda, it's got like a trademark, and we want the same Bermuda as we have at Paul Walker, so we'll have to use the same company out of Texas. So we also have included that in this package for you. But we're going to buy sand on our own to save on the sales tax, and we're going to go directly with Champion Turf Farms of Bay City, Texas, for the sprigging of the Bermuda for the $48,000. But all total here, we're looking at $108,000. The lowest quote on redoing the greens was from Par Lane Outdoor Solutions, and their local company in Alvaton at $108,000. And so they will get all the greens ready and prepared and get ready for Champion Turf Farms to come in and sprig the Bermuda within the time frame for that Bermuda to take hold and grow roots, and us have a course to play on, hopefully by late summer, early fall, October, hopefully. And so we realize the need we have to get both things done at the same time. We feel like we can manage the range ourselves, get that up and running, but we'll need Par Lane to come in to work on the greens at the same time, and we'll need to purchase the sand on our own to save on the sales tax, and then we'll outsource the Bermuda because it's a trademarked item, and then all totals $175,750. Mike Mitchum is here. He can answer any specific detailed questions you have on this project. And that kind of gives you an overview of where we're at.
I missed the last meeting, and I'm going to apologize, but I want to thank everybody for their support on this golf course. I think it's just a huge asset to our community, and we need to keep it going.
But I'm wondering, and this is a little off topic, so you can say we can do this later, if we had any discussion on entrances. You know, I know right now we share an entrance with the Hobson House, and I've had people say, you know, if you don't have like a main entrance on a main highway like Veterans with a sign, that it just gets lost down there. And, you know, I didn't know if there was any discussion on access and accessibility and those kinds of things, or is that something we're going to address?
We are working on some possibilities with that and trying to get some estimates together, and that will probably be brought to you during the budget presentation as a CIP project. Greg has been looking into that and what it would take to get that done. So, Greg, do you have anything to add to that? We're kind of in the midst of working and putting that together to see what we could do there.
I think that'll really generate some traffic if it's a little more visible and it's got a sign dedicated and an entrance dedicated where, you know, if I'm driving down Veterans, I might say, you know, I haven't played over there in a while, or right now we're just kind of a hidden gem.
It would help. We think it would probably help Hobson House out and
Absolutely.
the traffic to the ball fields and everything down there. So we're looking into that project.
Okay, thank you.
Are we given it a time frame before we evaluate what has gone on down there? What year, 2 years, based on the money we put in it? Is it long enough for an evaluation?
I think once we get the range in, we were anticipating a pretty short payback period on the range, and once it's paid off, you know, you'd have additional revenues being brought into that course, and we would see that course return to a profitable entity among the golf courses here in town. So as far as, I mean, you're going to have an investment of the netting on the range, but we think the payback on that is reasonable within 4 to 5 years at minimum. And so if it comes to the point where, you know, we see that range is not a profitable venture, I guess we could take down the nets and look at something else. But by then you'd have, I think you should have a viable business going down there for the range, and you'd have the golf course renovated and operating as well. So I think you got to give it 3 to 5 years to really know how this thing comes out. I know it seems like a long time, but
Given the Masters tournament last weekend, that we may see a little resurgence of interest in golf, and especially with Top Golf being so big up in Louisville and Nashville and other larger communities. It'll be really good for our community to have this driving range. I really do.
I also have a question. So we had very specific quotes at our last meeting, and with us doing a lot of the work, and so I was just wondering if this changes the amount that we are projecting to spend on this project.
Good evening. I'll try to be brief. We think we can still stay within the budget that we proposed. We're just going outside for help because of the timing issue with doing the driving range and the golf course improvements concurrently at the same time. It's really the timing is if we miss the weather, which Kentucky weather is very variable. You could be looking at fall of next year before we could have it open. That's just too long, too much loss of revenue.
So what are the factors that would make us go over budget and versus under budget with adding this or outsourcing this part of it?
Actual factors that could cause us to go over budget right now, all that I can see, to be honest with you, would be the netting. You know, we had quotes based on a 100-foot tile. Actually, we were basing on 60-foot tile, I'm sorry. The ball trajectory study that we had done from the consulting firm in California said that we're going to need them to be 162 feet. Now that's kind of the, a Cadillac version. We can always, settle for a Chevrolet, if that makes sense. But Until we put that out for bid, we won't have a firm number on the net and the poles. And to me, that's the only thing that I can see that will actually cause budgetary issues. As far as the preparation, the sprigs, your golf cart pass, everything that we proposed otherwise, we're still well within, looking like we'll be well within those numbers.
And when will we have that quote?
Well, we'll have to, because of the size of it, and unless we can figure out a way to do it, we'll have to go through the competitive bid process, which will take us 60 to 70 days by the time we advertise a bid, receive bids, make the award, and go through the actual competitive bid process. So as far as having those numbers, you're probably looking at 30 days or so before we can get it advertised, get bids back at that point. And then, of course, we'll have to make a decision whether we award it or not.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And it may not be the time to add it, but I found it interesting. The play at the other courses just this spring, of course, we've had up and down temperatures, has already increased 35% just from Riverview being closed. And last week, Crosswinds was rented out for one whole day, which is unusual. It was a pretty day, and they had 157 rounds of play at Paul Walker. Almost couldn't support that much traffic. They were maxed out. So the course is being missed. Thank you.
Comments or questions?
Nash,
Yes.
Beasley Brown,
Yes.
Perigin,
Yes.
Denning,
Yes.
Wilkerson.
2019.
Municipal order authorizing the approval and submission of fiscal year 2020 annual plan for the Housing Choice Voucher Program.
So moved.
Second.
We held a public hearing on February 21st to receive public comments on this. Copies of the plan were distributed to members of the Resident Advisory Board for review. And then all those were considered, the comments from the public and the RAB were considered and incorporated into this plan as appropriate. This is the 75 days prior to the beginning of each fiscal year, and this is the 5-year update of our HUD program that we have, our Public Housing Agency, PHA. Brent Childers is here if you have any additional questions. We're adopting this plan. Ask for your approval.
Nash,
Yes.
Beasley Brown,
Yes.
Perigin,
Yes.
Denning, Wilkerson.
2019.
Municipal order authorizing the submission of an application to the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet for the Transportation Alternatives Program funds in an amount up to $640,000.
So moved.
Second.
This one's a little convoluted, but in 2016, we applied for $948,000 for TAP grant, and this was to do the 2-mile greenway between downtown and West End neighborhood, basically from Kentucky Street to Hobson Grove Park. We only got about $500,000 of that in 2017, and that included our local match of $125,000. So the state is telling us now that we could go ahead and apply again in order to complete the entire project. So we're asking for your approval to apply for what would in total be $800,000, but we would receive $640,000, which represents 80%, and then we would match that with $160,000, which would be our 20%. So this would be to complete that planned greenway between downtown and West End. It will also would make safety improvements at 4 intersections that are listed there in your memo: Veterans Memorial and Clay, Veterans in Gordon, and then Gordon and Double Springs, and Double Springs and Church Street. So Greg Meredith again is here if you have any questions about the project or about the application, as well as Nick.
Call the roll.
Nash,
Yes.
Beasley Brown,
Yes.
Perigin,
Yes.
Denning,
Yes.
Wilkerson.
2019.
Municipal order authorizing the Housing Authority of Bowling Green to retain the city's portion of the payment in lieu of taxes for the 2018 tax year in the total amount of $22,613.60.
So moved.
Second.
This has been occurring for a number of years where the Housing Authority has asked for their payment in lieu of tax payment back. Their payment in lieu of tax is based on their housing. It's not on the tax roll, but yet there is an in lieu of agreement in place. But we have kind of had a gentleman's agreement to give this back through your all's approval. And so we're bringing this to you tonight. We received a letter from Abraham Williams requesting the use of this money to be returned for the use of costs for two tutors, providing group and one-on-one assistance to the youth that participate in their after-school program at the Housing Authority. So the total give back would be $22,613.60.
Actually, if I may, that's an incorrect amount. That's based on the old property tax rate, the 2.06. So we're at 2.05. The number is actually on the back side of that memo.
Sorry.
Where it says city treasurer at the bottom, general fund, it's $22,402.47.
22,402, is that correct?
22,402 and 47 cents.
About $200 less than that.
Yeah.
I apologize for that mistake.
Where did, pardon me?
Yes.
I didn't understand what you said, I'm sorry.
I'll go ahead and, well, we'll let Commissioner Nash ask your question first now.
I was only wondering where I could find that number.
On this,
It's on the spreadsheet attached.
the first one in your
Backside
packet.
of the memo.
It's at the bottom.
Got it.
Do you want to vote to amend the municipal order and then vote on the municipal order as amended to change that number?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Beasley Brown, second by Perigin to change 22,613.60 to 22,402.47.
Vote on the amendment, haven't we?
Vote on first on amending the municipal order, and then we'll come back for the second vote.
That's what this vote, any discussion on the amendment? So this vote is to change the amount. Please call the roll.
Nash,
Yes.
Beasley Brown,
Yes.
Perigin,
Yes.
Denning,
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Now we're voting on the municipal order as amended at 22,402.47. I've got the motion in the second, so all we need to do is vote.
Call the roll.
So please call the roll.
Nash,
Yes.
Beasley Brown,
Yes.
Perigin,
Yes.
Denning,
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Municipal Order 2019-54.
Municipal order authorizing an agreement between the Commonwealth of Kentucky Transportation Cabinet Department of Highways and the City of Bowling Green, supplemental agreement number 1, providing additional funds for the construction costs of a connector road between Russellville Road and Kobe Way.
Moved.
As you know, we've been working on the connector from Russell Road to the Southern Kentucky Industrial Park, and design phase is nearing completion, and we are ready to begin construction phase very soon. So we have been notified that the cabinet will provide us up to $3.8 million in reimbursable funds for the construction phase of this project. And so the city will be responsible for any ineligible cost and anything that's above the total of $4,480,000 for this project. I think we had a budget of roughly $600 and some thousand for design, $680,000, and I think some of that may be left over, Greg, is that correct? And maybe, you don't mind to fill in the gaps here?
So that process, process is not complete. We're about 75% complete on design. We have 2 parcels of right-of-way to acquire. We have been in conversations with them. We think it's no problem. There are some utility relocations to do too, and we're trying to minimize that. So yes, I think this you know, we've designed it in such a way that it should fall within the realm of the budget that we've been given by the state.
Requesting approval just to authorize or execute this agreement with the state for the construction phase.
Comments or questions? Call the roll.
Nash,
Yes.
Beasley Brown,
Yes.
Perigin,
Yes.
Denning,
Yes.
Wilkerson.
First reading of ordinance BG 2019-13.
Ordinance relating to classification pay schedules. Ordinance amending the classification pay schedules to replace S for protective sworn with F for fire and P for police of the City of Bowling Green for fiscal year 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Perigin, second.
Currently, we have 3 pay schedules that city employees can be assigned to when they're hired. There's a Schedule G for our general employees, there's a Schedule D for our department heads, and currently there's a Schedule S for our sworn police and fire officers. We are proposing tonight to establish separate schedules for police and fire to better accommodate the differences in those 2 departments. There will be a Schedule P and a Schedule F to replace the combined schedule currently that's Schedule S. I know it's confusing. We do believe both departments serve different purposes and fulfill different needs, and feel that this is the time that we need to go ahead and make 2 schedules to give them more flexibility. And Aaron is here tonight to go over, kind of give you an overview of what these pay plans will look like. Aaron?
As Jeff mentioned, we've had one schedule for all sworn public safety personnel for a long time, and we are recognizing in discussions with the administration of those departments that they continue to have challenges in different areas and different areas where we need to potentially start paying them a little bit differently. So we have proposed to you 2 separate schedules. One that would cover sworn employees on the police department and one for the fire department. They are attached. You'll see that it's very similar to today's. The proposed fire schedule is pretty much the exact same as today, and it has been adjusted for the COLA that we will be proposing later on in the budget period. The police schedule is being adjusted to be a little bit different. The starting wages of all of the grades are the same or very similar within a couple of dollars from the starting grades of the fire department schedule. The main differences are in the number of steps, and therefore the value of the steps has changed slightly in the police department structure than the fire structure. Additional pay supplements are addressed in Section 2.5 of the Administrative Personnel Policy, and it may be revised at a later time that we will be presenting you probably closer to June.
Comments or questions?
Nash,
Yes.
Beasley Brown,
Yes.
Perigin,
Yes.
Denning,
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Yes, first reading of ordinance BG 2019-14.
Ordinance annexing right-of-way by consent. Ordinance annexing 12.28 acres of right-of-way located on the I-65 and US 31W Connector Road from Miss Paul Road to US 31W, presently owned by the Commonwealth of Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, with said territory being contiguous to existing city limits.
So moved. Second.
Second by Perry. I think the next 3.
Yeah, Mayor, if it's okay, I'd like to just handle all 3 together here. These next 3 items relate to annexation of right-of-way. We're not taking over any maintenance responsibilities. Basically, what we're doing is cleaning up what's ours and what's the county's for emergency response in these areas. One section is I-65 to the 31W Connector Road. That's located between Connector Road, southbound off-ramp of 6880. And then the other one is running along I-65 to US 31W, and that's located around the former Clyde Spinks property. The first one is the Wilson property. And then the third one will be related to Veterans Memorial Lane from Stonehenge Drive to approximately the 275 feet north of Morgantown Road, and then another section from Morgantown Road around the corner to Veterans Memorial. So these are the next three municipal orders. Again, the state recognizes the fact that they will still maintain control of the right-of-ways in their letter that was addressed to Mayor Wilkerson from Chief District Engineer Joe Plunk. So these are, recommend these for approval of the annexation of these right-of-ways.
I will add a couple of comments. We talked about this at a retreat some time back. We've held off as we've been trying to get the census reannexation, reboundary done in anticipation for the upcoming census day, April 1st, 2020. So try to be prepared for that. We'll also have a few more of these coming in meetings. These three were already ready, so we want to go ahead and get them on the agenda tonight as these cleanups, as City Manager said, for public safety cleanup. This is no way a responsibility. These are state-maintained right-of-ways. These will still be state roads. This is more for public safety cleanup, so dispatch knows which fire department to send and which police or sheriff's office to send.
Comments or questions?
So are we, the city, going to be answering calls in those areas? Has it already been
Yes,
delineated?
we will be responding to calls in that area, and we're already responding to calls in that area. Some of these are literally, the boundaries did this, and then all of a sudden we built a road across it.
Yeah.
And you didn't have this annex. We just need to clean this up so it's clear for dispatchers, emergency communicators to say, this is the city, this is the county, and this is an area that we can make those cleanups. Some areas aren't so easy to clean up.
It's kind of similar to Cade Mill Road where you have in and out with
Times, I believe.
probably right, yeah.
What about that?
We're trying to address that issue.
Anyone else? Please call the roll.
Nash.
Yes.
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Denning.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
First reading of ordinance BG.
Ordinance annexing right-of-way by consent. Ordinance annexing 0.56 acre of right-of-way located on the I-65 and US 31W connector road along US 6880, presently owned by the Commonwealth of Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, with said territory being contiguous to existing city limits.
Someone,
Second?
Second by Nash. Any other questions?
Nash.
Yes.
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Denning.
yes,
Wilkerson.
Reading of ordinance BG 2019.
Ordinance annexing right-of-way by consent. Ordinance annexing 20.51 acres of right-of-way located on Veterans Memorial and Morgantown Road, presently owned by the Commonwealth of Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, with said territory being contiguous to existing city limits.
So moved.
Second?
Perigin, second by Nash. Are there any further questions? Please call the roll.
Nash.
Yes.
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Denning.
yes,
Wilkerson.
First reading of ordinance BG 2019-17.
Ordinance amending Code of Ordinances. Ordinance amending Chapter 2 Administration of the City of Bowling Green Code of Ordinances to amend Subchapter 2-2 Board of Commissioners related to action by the Board of Commissioners as recommended by the Board of Ethics.
Second?
Second by Nash. Ms. Misley, you want to explain it?
I believe, Gene, will it be better to explain these next two items and kind of give you an overview of the changes being proposed to Chapter 25? Gene?
Yes, sir. We'll go through this quickly and get everything done. As you recall, a few weeks ago, the Kentucky League of Cities came in and gave training to us to recertify as a city of ethics. As part of that, they recommended 2 or 3 changes to our code of ethics. Following that meeting, I had Commissioner Beasley Brown and the mayor contact me about wanting to get some of those changes approved and done. So we prepared some stuff, took it to the Board of Ethics a couple of weeks ago. They reviewed this and have recommended the changes proposed to you tonight. The first one is in Chapter 2. If you recall, one of the things that the Kentucky League of Cities talked about was abstentions and leaving the room and that kind of stuff. Once we started looking at ours, we thought maybe that our abstention policy was maybe a little bit too strictly worded. It was financial only, and there's some times that you needed to abstain that was not connected to money for you or somebody else. So we kind of brought that in and said now you can abstain to comply with the ethics code. if you're unable to fairly judge the matter before the Board of Commissioners, or if you have a financial interest. And we did add language in that if you now abstain, before we said you could leave the podium. We did put language in now, you need to leave the room. If it's a discussion during the closed session, you need to leave the room as well, too. So that's the changes in Chapter 2 that we're proposing. In Chapter 25, the Code of Ethics, the domestic partner language that the Kentucky League of Cities recommended, we're putting that, we're proposing that tonight. Make sure everybody understands that deals just with this chapter only, domestic partner, and it deals with conflicts of interest only. We're not providing insurance or anything else to domestic partners. Basically, the concept is if you should not be taking a vote on something that will financially benefit your spouse or your child or your parent or your sibling, then you shouldn't be taking a position and taking action on something that can benefit a domestic partner. So we define domestic partner in this ordinance from the Kentucky League of Cities language, and then amended Chapter 25 to bring that into 2 or 3 things, including definitions and also on the financial disclosure. The only major thing after in this one was in the nepotism section. We defined relative in that one. We moved relative back up to the definitions where it should have been probably before, because all definitions should have been in one section. So we took it out of the nepotism section. And then Commissioner Beasley Brown, I think she was right. That was one long paragraph section. So we just broke it apart and made it, I think, read a lot more better, or a lot more better. Maybe I may have wrote it the way I talk. Make it better sounding than it did before, make it clearer. It didn't change anything in, just made it clearer. And that's all, I'm done.
I don't have any comment on that.
I have a question. Gene, when we talk about abstention, it says any abstention shall be disclosed. I moved my cursor. Any abstention shall be disclosed to the remaining commissioners and to the public.
That was already in the current language. We kept it in.
And so does that, what exactly does that mean? Members of this commission have abstained in the past, and I've asked for a reason and was told that one doesn't need to be provided. Does this change that?
This was current language we already had. That, I mean, I'm not sure how to answer your question, other we didn't add that language, it's always there.
So if somebody abstains, I'll ask the question a different way. I worked for Judge Huddleston long enough. I know how to do this. If a member of the board abstains, are they required to state the reason for their abstention?
This language says yes.
Okay.
So I've got to tell you why I'm abstaining?
Well, you have to tell all of us why. You want to make it personal? Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, you got to tell me.
Any other questions? We're voting on the first one here on the,
Actually, Chapter 2, I apologize, I said Chapter 25.
other comments or questions?
Nash,
Yes.
Beasley Brown,
Yes.
Perigin,
Yes.
Denning,
Yes.
Wilkerson.
First reading of
Ordinance amending Code of Ordinances. Ordinance amending Chapter 25 Code of Ethics of the City of Bowling Green Code of Ordinances to amend subchapters related to definitions, nepotism, and financial disclosure as recommended by the Board of Ethics.
Second?
Second by Nash. For the explanation, is there any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Nash,
Yes.
Beasley Brown,
Yes.
Perigin,
Yes.
Denning,
I'm not telling Slim nothing. Yes.
Wilkerson.
Okay, there's no member of the public left to make a comment. Our next scheduled meeting is May 7th. We'll be going into closed session. No vote.